Beneath the golden sands of Egypt lies a silence that has never been broken. A silence older than language, older than history. And yet, something stirs. Massive stone blocks cut with surgical precision. Tombs that seem too perfect, too aligned, too impossible for their time. In chambers untouched for millennia, strange anomalies defy explanation. Sealed doors that lead nowhere, hieroglyphs that speak of gods descending from the sky, and technologies hinted at in art, but absent from the archaeological record. For centuries, Egypt has been the land of pharaohs and pyramids, but the deeper we dig, the stranger it becomes. Why were certain tombs built with materials that don't exist nearby? How did they move hundreds of tons across desert plains with no known machinery? What secrets are still hidden beneath the Sphinx, or in chambers we have yet to open? These are not tales of fantasy. These are the real, unexplained puzzles left behind by one of the world's most advanced ancient civilizations. So, sit back, relax, and let's dive into the most intriguing mysteries of ancient Egypt, the ones history books don't dare to explain. In the heart of the Giza Plateau, beneath the sun that has watched over stone for more than 4,000 years, rises a monument that refuses to surrender its secrets. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, majestic, immutable. A geometric mountain of limestone and granite, its shape unchanging even as empires rose and fell around it. Millions of blocks, each weighing several tons, placed with such precision that even now, in the age of lasers and satellites, we still debate how it was done. Step closer, and the illusion of simplicity fades. The deeper you go, the stranger it becomes. Inside this colossal structure, a network of passageways winds through stone like the veins of a sleeping beast. Narrow corridors, ascending shafts, chambers tucked away in places no one expected. And at the center of it all, emptiness. No mummies, no golden treasure, just echoes and questions. The king's chamber, with its monolithic granite blocks and oddly resonant acoustics, has long captured the imagination of explorers. Above it, 5 small, relieving chambers, stacked like hidden lofts in stone, supposedly designed to distribute the pyramid's immense weight. But why then do these chambers bear the red ochre marks of ancient workers, quarry inscriptions of names and symbols, while the rest of the pyramid remains strangely pristine? Were they truly structural necessities, or something more? Then there's the Queen's Chamber, misnamed perhaps, for no queen was ever buried there. It sits in silence, oddly unfinished, with 2 narrow shafts that rise toward the outer walls but stop short, sealed at both ends by small stone doors. For years, no one knew what lay beyond them. Were they symbolic pathways to the afterlife, ventilation channels, or something more deliberate? In 2011, a robotic exploration of one such shaft, led by a team from the University of Leeds, revealed something curious. A small copper-handled door. Behind it, another cavity. And behind that, yet another stone, marked, seemingly intentionally, with symbols. What lies beyond is still unknown. Permission to drill further has never been granted. And then, in 2017, came the revelation that reignited global fascination. The Scan Pyramids project, using muon tomography, a particle physics technique capable of seeing through solid rock, detected a vast, previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery. A space at least 30 meters long, possibly horizontal, whose function remains entirely speculative. It is not connected to any known chamber. There is no obvious entrance. It had never been detected before, by any means. What is it? A hidden storage room? A ceremonial passage? An intentional design feature? Or perhaps something waiting to be discovered, something the builders left behind deliberately, out of reach, but not out of mind. Historians and Egyptologists urge caution. Some suggest the void may simply be a structural anomaly, an air pocket formed to relieve pressure. But even they admit its size, location, and orientation are odd, not random, not accidental. Others look beyond the mainstream. They ask whether the builders of the pyramid, whether they were Egyptians of the 4th dynasty or inheritors of even older knowledge, intended to encode something more. Knowledge, energy, a cosmic alignment. The Grand Gallery itself, with its steep, vaulted walls and perfectly aligned joints, has long been considered an architectural marvel. But what if its purpose wasn't just architectural? Some theorists note the pyramid's mathematical precision, how it encodes the value of pi, the golden ratio, the curvature of the earth, how its sides align almost perfectly to the cardinal directions. Could the hidden chamber relate to this? Could it be part of a machine-like system we've yet to understand? We know that in ancient times, access to the pyramid was sealed. The entrance was hidden beneath casing stones, invisible to the casual observer. Only in the 9th century, under the orders of Caliph al-Ma'mun, was a forced tunnel dug through its limestone layers, revealing the internal network. But even then, it yielded no tomb, no artifacts, just voids. As if the pyramid was never meant to house a body, but something else entirely. And if that's the case, what was it protecting or hiding? The Great Pyramid is the only remaining wonder of the ancient world. We have measured it, photographed it, modeled it, and yet it remains, in many ways, untouched. Untold corridors may still lie undiscovered. Beneath the base, rumors persist of deeper shafts, of sealed doors and sunken chambers. Some claim the Sphinx points the way. Others say the secrets lie in resonance, in vibration, in sound. But perhaps the most haunting possibility is the simplest, that the answers were never meant to be found, that the pyramid was built not to reveal, but to endure, to outlast floods, fires, time itself, that the knowledge it guards is locked not in gold or papyrus, but in stone and silence. And so, the mystery remains. A chamber we cannot see, a void we cannot enter, a question written in granite, 4,000 years old and still unanswered. What did the ancients build, and why? Perhaps the truth lies just behind the next wall, or perhaps it lies within the silence itself. So stay curious, stay open, and let us continue the journey deeper into the mysteries of ancient Egypt. As we leave behind the towering grandeur of the Great Pyramid and its unexplained inner chambers, the sands of Egypt draw us southward, towards something less visible, less preserved, but perhaps even more mysterious. It lies not beneath a pointed monument, but under flat, arid ground, a place where whispers of ancient marvels have long outlived the ruins themselves. Welcome to Hawara. At first glance, there's little to see. A dusty, windswept plain near the modern town of Fayoum, where scattered stone blocks lie half-buried in the desert floor. The sun beats down on cracked earth, and the landscape offers none of the splendor one might associate with ancient Egyptian wonders. But looks, as always, can deceive. For buried beneath this seemingly barren ground may lie one of the most astonishing architectural achievements ever described, an ancient labyrinth so vast and so complex that it left even the Greeks speechless. The earliest accounts come not from Egyptian sources, but from those who visited centuries later. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, claimed to have seen it with his own eyes. He described a structure grander than the pyramids themselves. 12 covered courts, vast in scale, a roof of solid stone, walls inscribed with carvings, and a subterranean level, even more mysterious, which, according to priests, held the tombs of kings and sacred crocodiles. Herodotus was not alone. Strabo, a Greek geographer writing 4 centuries later, echoed the tale. He, too, saw a massive complex near the pyramid of Amenemhat III, its remains half in ruin, but its magnificence still evident. He described endless colonnades, chambers, and winding passages that defied mapping. Even Pliny the Elder would write of this place, calling it the greatest of all Egyptian marvels. But today, the labyrinth is gone, or at least it appears to be. The structure once attributed to Amenemhat III, a 12th dynasty pharaoh of the Middle Kingdom, has been reduced to near invisibility. Excavations in the 19th century revealed little: fragments of walls, shattered columns, pieces of limestone scattered like the debris of a dream. In 1888, British archaeologist Flinders Petrie conducted a more rigorous investigation. He dismissed the Greek accounts as exaggeration, believing the labyrinth to be merely a mortuary temple attached to the pyramid. Nothing more. But not everyone agreed. In the early 2000s, a group of researchers from Belgium and Egypt conducted a study using ground-penetrating radar. Their scans revealed something astonishing beneath the surface: massive geometric anomalies, vast rectangular shapes, and orthogonal patterns buried several meters deep. According to their preliminary findings, the dimensions of the buried structures match the scale of the labyrinth described by ancient authors. Could it be? Could the lost labyrinth still exist, preserved beneath layers of silt, mud, and modern neglect? The Egyptian authorities were quick to dismiss the claims. No full excavation followed. The findings were quietly archived, and the desert fell silent once again. But the questions remain. Why would three separate ancient sources describe the same grand complex in similar terms if it never existed? Why do modern scans suggest the presence of massive man-made features underground? And why has no further exploration been allowed? Some believe the labyrinth may hold secrets of state, records, scrolls, sacred texts long lost to history. Others speculate that beneath the temple lies a system of chambers aligned to celestial patterns, perhaps containing knowledge far older than the Middle Kingdom itself. There are even those who suggest the labyrinth predates Amenemhat III entirely, that he merely repurposed or restored a structure built by a forgotten civilization. It is worth noting that ancient Egypt was a land of deliberate construction: temples, tombs, pyramids, each aligned with the stars, built to encode meaning. If the labyrinth was real, if it was as intricate and massive as described, then it was not made without purpose. Was it a library of stone? A funerary palace for the elite? A spiritual initiation center hidden from the unworthy? Or was it something else entirely? Something beyond function, built to symbolize the complexities of existence itself? Today, the site at Hawara remains quiet. Farmers till the surrounding fields. Tourists rarely come. A few blocks from the pyramid of Amenemhat III still stand, worn down by centuries of wind and water. But the rest, the maze of halls, the lost knowledge, the subterranean tombs, if they exist, they remain hidden. And perhaps that is the final puzzle. Not just what lies beneath Hawara, but why we no longer seek it. Is it fear of what we might find, or fear of what we might not? Beneath this unassuming plain, where nothing moves but the wind and shadows, a structure may still sleep. Stone corridors carved in silence, waiting to speak. Echoes of an empire that once ruled with such precision and purpose that even its ruins continue to defy time. And so we ask, is the labyrinth of Hawara truly lost? Or have we simply stopped listening? Let's continue deeper into the forgotten corners of ancient Egypt, where every grain of sand may still cover a doorway to the impossible. And from the scattered ruins of the labyrinth at Hawara, our path returns to the Giza Plateau, where one figure has watched the desert drift and the stars wheel overhead for thousands of years. It stands not in the center of power, But just off to the side, silent and still. Half lion, half human. Carved from the living bedrock of the plateau, it is both a monument and a mystery. The Great Sphinx of Giza. It rises from the sand with a calm that borders on the divine. Weathered, worn. Its body stretched low to the ground like a sentinel at rest. Its face, though battered and defaced, still bears an expression of stoic awareness, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun rises each day. The statue is massive, over 70 meters long, 20 meters tall. It is not assembled from blocks, but carved from a single mass of limestone. And yet, despite its scale and prominence, we know remarkably little about it. Who carved it? When? And most curiously, why does it look so old? For decades, the standard answer has been simple. The Sphinx was built during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre, around 2500 BCE, making it a contemporary of the Second Pyramid at Giza. The alignment, the style, the proximity, they all seem to fit. A temple sits directly in front of the Sphinx, and statues of Khafre have been found nearby. It is a neat narrative, one that fits within Egyptology's carefully constructed timeline. But the stones themselves may be telling a different story. Look closely at the Sphinx's body. Along its sides, just beneath the layers of restoration blocks, the limestone is deeply eroded, not in the way one might expect from wind-blown sand, but in a curious, vertical pattern. The rock has been worn in deep undulating curves, almost as if it were shaped not by the dryness of the desert, but by flowing water. Rain, torrents, conditions not seen on the Giza Plateau in over 5,000 years. In the early 1990s, this observation gained new attention thanks to the work of Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University. He proposed that the weathering on the Sphinx's enclosure could only have been caused by prolonged exposure to heavy rainfall. Rainfall that would have occurred thousands of years before the reign of Khafre, perhaps even as early as 7,000 or 8,000 BCE. If true, this would upend everything we believe about the age of Egyptian civilization. The backlash was swift. Egyptologists countered that the weathering could be explained by salt crystallization or by groundwater rising and evaporating over centuries. They argued that assigning the Sphinx to a pre-dynastic era required far more evidence than geological patterns alone. But Schoch was not alone. Other geologists supported his claims. The patterns, they insisted, were unmistakably consistent with water erosion. And so, the debate lingers. If the Sphinx truly predates Khafre, if it was carved in a time when the Giza Plateau was green, when rainfall was regular, and the Sahara had not yet fully formed, who made it? No written records speak of such a feat. No other monuments from that time survive. The Sphinx would be a lone messenger from a forgotten chapter of human history. There are further curiosities. The head of the Sphinx appears disproportionately small when compared to its body, leading some to suggest it may have been recarved at a later date. If that's true, what did the original face look like? A lion's head? An unknown ruler? An entirely different symbolic form now lost to time? And then, there is the alignment. The Sphinx faces directly east, toward the rising sun on the spring equinox. Some researchers have suggested this orientation, combined with the constellation of Leo, points to a symbolic connection between the statue and the age of Leo, an astrological period that began around 10,500 BCE. Was the Sphinx built to honor that celestial alignment? Could it be a monument not only of stone, but of time? Mainstream scholars remain skeptical. The lack of inscriptions, the absence of contemporaneous artifacts, the absence of supporting structures from the proposed era, all weigh heavily against such theories. And yet, the erosion remains, undeniable, etched into the very stone like a signature of a forgotten storm. Even the restoration efforts, conducted over the past century, hint at the puzzle's depth. Each layer of repair reveals more of the statue's fragility, its crumbling flanks, its hollowed chambers, its battle with time. Some archaeologists whisper of hidden cavities beneath the Sphinx's paws. In 1993, seismic surveys detected anomalies, possible hollow spaces beneath the monument. But they remain unexcavated. Permission to dig further has never been granted. What might lie beneath? A tomb? A chamber of records? Or simply the silence of the bedrock? The Sphinx endures, not just as a sculpture, but as a question. It stands alone on the Giza Plateau, older than its neighbors in spirit, if not in fact. And it asks us to reconsider the stories we tell about beginnings, about civilization, about the memory of stone and the impermanence of certainty. Was it Khafra's monument, or was it already ancient in his time? The answer may lie hidden in the layers of erosion, in the scars shaped by rains no living human has ever seen. And so we ask, what does the Sphinx remember? That we have forgotten? Let's continue. The sands are far from silent, and the mysteries of ancient Egypt are only just beginning to speak. As we leave behind the timeless gaze of the Sphinx and the silent riddle of its erosion, we journey further south, along the Nile's winding path, to a temple complex less well known, but no less enigmatic. Hidden in the heart of Upper Egypt, near the quiet town of Cana, stands the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. At first glance, it seems far removed from the mysteries of the Old Kingdom, a Ptolemaic-era construction built in the twilight centuries of pharaonic rule. And yet, inside these walls lies a symbol that has baffled scholars and seekers alike. It is carved in stone, deep within a subterranean crypt, a depiction so unusual, so seemingly out of place, that it has come to be known by a name that sounds almost modern: the Dendera Light. Step into the dim corridors of the temple's underground chambers, and the atmosphere shifts. The air is thick, the passageways narrow. Torchlight flickers against reliefs that seem to hum with forgotten intent. On one wall, beneath the low ceiling of an enclosed shrine, the image comes into view. At first, it appears simple enough. Egyptian figures stand in ceremonial poses, as they do on countless other walls. But what captures the eye is what they hold: a long, bulbous object emerging from a lotus flower. Inside it, a wavy line, like a serpent or a filament, extends outward. The bulb is supported by a pillar, and in some depictions is connected to what appears to be a cable. Attendants surround the object, as if in reverence or operation. Mainstream Egyptologists interpret the scene through a mythological lens. The serpent, they suggest, represents a manifestation of the god Harsamtis emerging from a lotus, an image rooted in ancient creation myths. The entire motif is seen as a symbolic expression of rebirth and divine energy, consistent with Hathor's role as a nurturing goddess of life and fertility. But others have seen something else entirely. To some engineers, artists, and alternative theorists, the resemblance is uncanny. The object, bulbous, glass-like, with a serpentine filament, bears a striking similarity to a modern electric light bulb. The pillar resembles a jed column, often associated with stability, but here seen as potentially functioning like an insulator. The cable-like extension? A power source. Could it be that the ancient Egyptians possessed a form of electrical knowledge? Was the Dendera Light not a metaphor, but a memory of forgotten technology? The idea, of course, is controversial. No actual ancient light bulbs have ever been found. No batteries. No power grids. And yet, the temples themselves raise questions. Some inner chambers are carved with such precision, in such inaccessible places, that it's unclear how artisans worked in the dark. The common assumption is that they used reflective mirrors to bounce sunlight into deep corridors, but no such mirror system has ever been found intact. Oil lamps, though common, would have produced smoke in enclosed spaces, yet soot is largely absent in many temples. Could they have lit their way with something else? In 1938, a curious artifact was discovered in Iraq, now known as the Baghdad Battery. A clay jar with a copper cylinder and iron rod inside. While not Egyptian and dated much later, some have speculated that this object could function as a primitive galvanic cell. If that's true, could similar knowledge have existed earlier in Egypt? And if so, might the Dendera reliefs be more than symbolic? Still, critics point out that the image is unique. There are no other known depictions of similar bulbs elsewhere in Egypt. Why then would such advanced knowledge be hidden away in a single chamber with no explanatory texts? Is it possible we're simply projecting modern understanding onto ancient art? The mystery deepens when we examine the context. The Dendera Temple is a late-period structure, built during the Greco-Roman era. By then, many ancient Egyptian traditions were being reinterpreted, blended, or revived. Was this image a symbolic nod to ancient myths, visualized in a new, more abstract way? Or was it a preserved echo of something older, passed down from a civilization whose knowledge we no longer understand? Even within the mainstream, scholars acknowledge that ancient Egyptian symbolism was deeply layered, capable of conveying literal, spiritual, and cosmic truths simultaneously. What appears decorative may encode astronomical cycles. What seems mythical may serve as political metaphor. Could the Dendera Light belong to this hidden tradition? An image meant to preserve, not illuminate. Today, the chamber remains open to visitors. The carvings are there, etched in stone, untouched for millennia. And while most pass by without a second glance, some pause. Staring into the ancient bulb, they wonder, not just about electricity, but about what we choose to see. Are we reading too much into ancient art, or not enough? In a world where we often assume progress is linear, the Dendera Light reminds us that knowledge can vanish, that civilizations rise and fall, and that what seems impossible today may have once been commonplace and forgotten. So what is the Dendera Light? A symbol of rebirth? A tool of forgotten science? A puzzle carved in stone? The truth remains sealed in silence, deep within the temple walls, inviting us not to solve it, but to keep searching. And so we continue, guided not by certainty, but by wonder, deeper into the unexplained mysteries of ancient Egypt. From the cryptic carvings of the Dendera Light, we move now to a place far older and buried deeper beneath the sands, a place where the silence is so complete it feels almost sacred. Just a short distance from the step pyramid of Djoser, hidden beneath the desert floor of Saqqara, lies one of the most enigmatic and overlooked structures in all of ancient Egypt. The Serapeum. It begins with a descent. A long, sloping corridor, carved through bedrock, guides the visitor underground. The temperature drops, the light dims, and the deeper you go, the more the air begins to feel heavy, charged with something unspoken. At the end of the tunnel, passageways branch off into side chambers. It is here, in these quiet vaults, that the true mystery lies. Massive granite sarcophagi, 24 in total, stand in alcoves like dark monoliths, each one perfectly carved and polished, their corners crisp, their surfaces smooth to a mirror-like finish. They are immense, some over 4 meters long, weighing upwards of 70 tons. The lids alone are heavier than most modern military tanks. They were lowered into these chambers with such precision that a credit card cannot fit between the lid and the base. And yet, here they sit, empty. Mainstream archaeology tells us this was a burial site for the sacred Apis bulls. animals worshipped as earthly manifestations of the god Ptah. According to tradition, when a bull died, it was embalmed and placed inside one of these sarcophagi. A ritual continued for generations. Inscriptions on some of the boxes support this, referencing known pharaohs and priests. But the mystery is far from solved. For one, not all of the sarcophagi bear inscriptions. Many are completely bare. No hieroglyphs, no markings, no symbols of ownership or religious dedication. If these were sacred tombs, why leave them unsigned? And even more confounding is the engineering itself. The stone boxes are made of hard granite and diorite, materials so difficult to work with that even with today's tools, shaping and polishing them to such perfection would be a challenge. So how were they made? Each sarcophagus was hollowed out with an accuracy that defies explanation. Interior corners are almost perfectly square. The surfaces reflect light. Tool marks, if any exist, are microscopic. What kind of instruments did the ancient craftsmen use? Copper chisels and stone hammers, as commonly believed. Or is it possible they possess techniques or tools we no longer understand? And then there's the logistics. These boxes were quarried in Aswan, nearly 900 kilometers away. Transporting them across that distance, over desert and river, without damaging the sharp edges, and then lowering them into these underground chambers through narrow passages. How was it done? There are no ramps, no pulley systems, no inscriptions showing the process. Some believe the sarcophagi were not made by the Egyptians of the dynastic period at all, that they were inherited from an earlier culture, a lost civilization whose knowledge of stonework surpassed even that of the pyramid builders. Could these massive boxes be remnants of a time long forgotten, repurposed by the Egyptians in their reverence for the past? There are even more speculative theories. Some researchers note the resonant qualities of the chambers, how sound reverberates within them with unusual clarity. Could the Serapeum have been more than a tomb, a sound chamber, an energy conduit, a technological installation misunderstood by later generations? In 1850, French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette discovered the Serapeum almost by accident. Guided by local accounts and ancient texts, he began excavating in the sands near Saqqara. What he uncovered stunned the world, an underground complex that had remained sealed for centuries. But even he admitted confusion. The scale, the precision, the silence of the site. It felt unlike anything else in Egypt. Even today, the deeper we explore, the more questions emerge. Ground-penetrating radar has suggested that the Serapeum may extend beyond the currently accessible chambers. Could more boxes lie hidden? Could the true purpose of this site still be buried just meters away? And what of the boxes themselves? Why build them so large, so heavy, and so exacting, if the purpose was simply to inter an animal? Other Apis bull burials, found in nearby locations, are far more modest. Why the grandeur here? The Serapeum forces us to ask uncomfortable questions, not only about Egyptian history, but about the assumptions we make about the past. It challenges the narrative that human progress is a simple upward slope. It hints at something more cyclical, or perhaps fragmented. That civilizations can rise, reach heights we can scarcely imagine, and then vanish, leaving behind only silence and stone. Beneath the sands of Saqqara, these sarcophagi remain. They have no voices, no texts, no names etched into their granite skin. And yet, they speak, quietly, insistently, of a forgotten chapter in our shared story. A time when someone, for reasons unknown, carved and transported impossibly perfect monoliths, only to seal them in darkness. Why? Were they truly made for bulls? Or were the bulls an echo, a later ritual laid upon an older foundation? And most haunting of all, what else might still lie beneath our feet, waiting to be unearthed? The Serapeum does not answer. It only watches, silently, as we continue our search for the lost knowledge of ancient Egypt. From the shadowed halls of the Serapeum, where massive granite boxes whisper of lost knowledge, we return once more to the sunlit vastness of the Giza Plateau, where Egypt's most iconic symbols rise from the bedrock like a frozen miracle. The pyramids. Timeless, silent, unyielding. They dominate the desert skyline as they have for over 4 millennia. But despite their fame, we still do not fully understand them, especially one, the Great Pyramid of Khufu. It stands as the largest and most precisely aligned stone structure on Earth. Composed of over 2 million limestone and granite blocks, many weighing several tons, it rises 146 meters into the sky, once capped with a gleaming white limestone casing that would have reflected the sun like a beacon. And yet, inside this colossal monument is emptiness. A few small chambers, a narrow shaft here, a corridor there. No inscriptions, no hieroglyphs, no definitive indication of purpose. We are told it is a tomb. This has long been the accepted narrative, that Khufu, the second pharaoh of the 4th dynasty, commissioned this pyramid as his eternal resting place. But for all its precision, for all its grandeur, no mummy has ever been found within it. No grave goods, no funeral texts, not even a trace of organic remains. Could it really be that such an extraordinary effort, requiring decades of labor and logistical genius, was built solely for one man's death? Or was it something more? Consider the construction itself. The base is almost perfectly square, with a margin of error of less than a few centimeters. The sides are aligned with the cardinal points, north, south, east, west, with such accuracy that even modern technology would struggle to replicate it on that scale. The internal angles, the passageways, the location of the king's and queen's chambers, and the mysterious grand gallery, all are laid out with a geometric and mathematical precision that seems far beyond what was necessary for a tomb. More curious still are the materials. The king's chamber is constructed entirely from massive blocks of red granite, transported from Aswan, over 800 kilometers to the south. These stones were hoisted dozens of meters into the air and placed with interlocking precision, forming a chamber so acoustically resonant that it hums in certain frequencies. Why such effort? Why granite, when limestone was easier and more abundant? And then there are the shafts, narrow channels that extend from the king's and queen's chambers toward the pyramid's exterior. They were once thought to be ventilation shafts, but their angles do not support that. Instead, they align, almost perfectly, with specific stars in the ancient Egyptian sky. Orion's belt, Sirius, the circumpolar stars that never set. Were these celestial guides for the soul, or something else? Some researchers have suggested that the Great Pyramid may have functioned as a kind of machine. Not a machine in the modern sense, but an instrument, a structure designed to channel energy, resonate with the earth, or even amplify cosmic forces. Theories range from the electrical to the metaphysical. That the pyramid harnessed Earth's natural frequencies, that it operated like a giant harmonic resonator, that it was built not to house death, but to celebrate life, or consciousness, or some higher form of understanding. Mainstream Egyptology does not support these views, and rightfully demands evidence. Yet even the most grounded explanations still raise profound questions. The sheer manpower needed, tens of thousands of skilled workers, the logistics, the planning, all for a tomb? And what of the other pyramids? There are over 100 pyramids scattered across Egypt, and yet none match the perfection of Khufu's. Later structures are smaller, rougher, often collapsed. It's as though the knowledge used to construct the Great Pyramid was not built upon, but lost. Why? Were the pyramids, then, repositories of knowledge rather than bodies, symbols of stability, of cosmic order, or instruments whose function we can no longer interpret. Inside the Great Pyramid, there is no light. The air is still. The walls are bare. Yet many who enter speak of a strange feeling, an undeniable presence, a pressure in the silence. Perhaps it is nothing more than awe. Or perhaps the builders knew something we've forgotten about the relationship between structure, form, and human perception. And still, mysteries remain. In 2017, muon scans revealed a large void above the Grand Gallery, a space at least 30 meters long. Its purpose is unknown. It has no entrance, no markings. It was undiscovered for thousands of years. What lies inside? Another chamber? A symbolic space? Or the key to a greater design? The Great Pyramid continues to defy certainty. It has endured earthquakes, storms, and invasions. It has outlasted languages and empires. And still, it stands, silent as stone, indifferent to our curiosity. Was it truly just a tomb? Or is that simply the story we've told ourselves, because we have nothing better? As we walk its base, trace its angles, feel the weight of the centuries pressing down through each stone, we're left with a lingering question. What kind of civilization builds something so perfect, so enduring, and leaves behind so few clues? Perhaps the pyramids were never meant to be understood. Perhaps their true purpose was not to be discovered, but remembered. And so we continue our journey, deeper into the enigmas of ancient Egypt, where stone speaks louder than words, and every answer leads only to more questions. As we step away from the towering majesty of the pyramids, those immense monuments whose purpose still eludes us, we turn our attention to something much smaller. Less imposing, perhaps, but no less provocative. Tucked within the confines of the Giza Plateau, near the ancient temple of Isis, lies a single slab of stone that threatens to rewrite everything we think we know about Egypt's timeline. It is weathered and cracked, unassuming in size. And yet, etched into its surface is a record, an inventory, a list of objects and dedications. But within these quiet lines of hieroglyphs lies a claim that has stirred decades of controversy. This is the Inventory Stela. Discovered in the 19th century by Auguste Mariette, the same French archaeologist who unearthed the Serapeum, the stela was found near the ruins of a temple that had been repurposed in the late periods of Egyptian history. At first glance, it appears to be a typical commemorative text created during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, or perhaps written later in reference to his reign. But when its contents were translated, something didn't quite fit. The stela refers to Khufu, not as the builder of the Great Pyramid, but as a restorer. It claims that Khufu found the temple of Isis already in ruins, and that he repaired it. Most striking of all, it mentions the Sphinx and the pyramids as pre-existing structures, already ancient in Khufu's time. How could that be? According to mainstream chronology, Khufu ruled during the 4th dynasty, around 2500 BCE. The Great Pyramid is considered his most enduring legacy, commissioned and constructed under his authority. If the stela is accurate, then that foundation cracks, and with it, our entire understanding of Egypt's dynastic rise. But is it accurate? Many Egyptologists dismiss the Inventory Stela as a later fabrication, likely created during the 26th dynasty, over 1,500 years after Khufu's reign. The writing style, they argue, is inconsistent with Old Kingdom texts. The title, Builder of the Pyramids of Isis, appears nowhere else in authentic records. The stela, they suggest, was part of a wider cultural movement during the Sate period, a kind of nostalgic revivalism that sought to associate current temples with older legends and deities. In this interpretation, the mention of Khufu and the pyramids is more symbolic than historical, a means of granting legitimacy to a local shrine by connecting it to a golden age long past. And yet, even this explanation raises questions. Why would a 26th dynasty scribe go to the trouble of naming Khufu as a restorer rather than glorifying him as the original builder, as tradition would dictate? Why invent a narrative in which the pyramids and the Sphinx already existed, instead of reinforcing the state-approved history that celebrated the pharaohs as divine architects? Some researchers argue that such a deviation is telling, that instead of fabricating a myth, the stela may be preserving a memory, perhaps confused, perhaps fragmented, but real. A tradition passed down orally, hinting at a far older origin for Egypt's most iconic monuments. If the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid predated Khufu, who built them? This question echoes through the corridors of alternative theories. Some propose a lost pre-dynastic civilization, highly advanced in engineering and astronomy, whose knowledge was inherited, if only partially, by the Egyptians we know from the historical record. Others look even further back, pointing to the end of the last ice age, around 10,500 BCE, when cataclysmic changes reshaped the planet. Could the monuments be remnants from that time? And could the Inventory Stela be a faint whisper from a lineage of kings or builders that we've forgotten? Still, skepticism remains warranted. The stela's authenticity is not in question, but its historical accuracy is. It does not provide dates, construction techniques, or architectural details. It offers only a statement, simple, quiet, and unsettling. Khufu found. Khufu restored. Is that enough to shake the foundation of Egyptology? Or is it a footnote, a relic of priestly invention in an era already saturated with myth? The stone itself refuses to answer. It simply endures, as Egyptian stone so often does. Its hieroglyphs, though worn, still speak across millennia. They describe altars, shrines, and offerings. They paint a picture of a pharaoh not creating, but preserving. Of monuments not built, but already present. And so, the inventory. Stela remains suspended in a kind of historical limbo, caught between the rigid timelines of orthodoxy and the tantalizing shadows of something older. Is it a forgery of belief, or a fossil of truth? Perhaps it is both, a blend of reverence, memory, and forgotten history carved into limestone. A monument not to a man, but to a mystery. And as we continue this journey through the riddles of ancient Egypt, we are left to wonder, what if the monuments we admire were already ancient when the first pharaohs walked the earth? What if the real builders have no names? And what if the past is not behind us, but buried just beneath our feet? From the faded glyphs of the Inventory Stela, etched with unsettling echoes of a forgotten past, we now journey south, far from the stone giants of Giza and deep into the heart of the granite quarries of Aswan. Here, beneath the blazing sun, among jagged ridges and ancient dust, lies one of the most enigmatic remnants of ancient engineering ever discovered. Not a monument standing tall, but one left incomplete, as if the hands that shaped it had suddenly vanished. This is the unfinished obelisk. At first glance, it appears almost like a natural formation, a shallow trench cut into the granite bedrock, surrounded by chisel marks and scattered tool fragments. But look closer, and its outline emerges, a colossus nearly 42 meters in length. Had it been completed and raised, it would have stood as the largest known obelisk in Egypt, nearly a third taller than any that survives today. Weighing an estimated 1,200 tons, it would have dwarfed its siblings in Karnak, Luxor, and beyond. And yet, it was never moved, never erected, never finished. Why? Mainstream archaeology suggests the answer is simple. During the final stages of carving, a long fracture appeared in the granite, rendering the structure unstable. With no way to repair it, the project was abandoned. The ancient stonemasons simply walked away, leaving behind not only a shattered obelisk, but a remarkably preserved snapshot of their working process. The unfinished obelisk allows us to see the grooves, the angles, the marks left by pounding dolerite balls, a technique believed to have been used to pound and loosen the rock over time. But the deeper one looks, the more the questions begin to surface. For even with the accepted techniques of the time, the sheer scale of the obelisk raises unsettling doubts. How did workers of the New Kingdom, supposedly armed only with stone tools and simple levers, carve with such precision into a solid bed of granite? How did they maintain straight edges across 42 meters of solid rock? And more pressingly, had it been completed, how would they have transported it? There are no ramps, no clear mechanical methods that explain how such a monolith could have been lifted from its quarry bed, moved across uneven terrain, ferried down the Nile, and raised vertically without splintering under its own immense weight. To move a 1,200-ton obelisk today would require state-of-the-art cranes, reinforced roadways, and meticulous engineering. Yet here it lies, partially detached from the earth, as if its creators had every confidence it could be transported, until something stopped them. Was it merely a crack, or something more? Some suggest that the unfinished obelisk reveals not a failure of technique, but the limits of an inherited technology. That the ancient Egyptians may have possessed, or preserved, knowledge from an earlier, forgotten culture, one with an understanding of stonework, weight distribution, and possibly even energy or vibration far beyond what we currently attribute to the Bronze Age. The unfinished obelisk, they argue, is not an incomplete project. It's a monument to the boundary between what the Egyptians knew and what they had lost. Further intrigue comes from the nature of the cuts themselves. In certain areas, the trench around the obelisk is so narrow and smooth that some researchers have questioned whether pounding stones alone could have achieved it. There are no chisel marks, no fractures from rough tools. The walls are curved in places, almost fluid. Could some lost technique have allowed them to soften or manipulate the granite in ways we no longer understand? Mainstream scholars are cautious, and rightfully so. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but even the most conservative voices admit there is no definitive answer to how the obelisk would have been moved. We have theories, models, hypotheticals, but no complete demonstration, no ancient manual, just the stone and the silence. The location itself adds to the mystery. Aswan was the source of Egypt's finest granite, used not only for obelisks, but for the inner chambers of pyramids, the colossal statues of Ramses, and the sarcophagi found in sites like the Serapeum. It was a place of both craftsmanship and reverence. The work done here was not merely technical, it was sacred. Obelisks were not just decorative, they were symbols of divine light, immortal pillars connecting the earth with the heavens. Their placement, alignment, and even the stone itself carried spiritual meaning. Why then would such a sacred endeavor be left abandoned? Was it the crack, a sign from the gods, a shift in dynastic power? Or did something else interrupt the process, some event now lost to time? And if the crack was so devastating, why did no one attempt to reuse the stone elsewhere? The unfinished obelisk lies exactly where it was left, untouched, as though preserved intentionally, as if the ancient workers understood it would one day become a question for another era. Today, visitors walk along raised paths built above the trench. They peer down at the monolith, half-buried, sun-bleached, quietly monumental in its stillness. It is a sight that offers more than visual wonder. It invites introspection, humility, a confrontation with limits, both theirs and ours. Because in the end, we don't truly know why it was abandoned. We don't fully understand how it was being carved, how it would have been moved, or what vision of divine order it was meant to fulfill. The unfinished obelisk is a riddle in granite, too large to ignore, too incomplete to explain. And so we ask, once again, was it a failure of tools, or a relic of forgotten mastery? What knowledge might have been lost with the strike of a crack, and what might still be waiting beneath the dust, half carved, half buried, on the edge of memory and stone? From the silent quarry of Aswan, where an abandoned monolith lies half carved in stone, we now return north, back to the ancient necropolis of Saqqara. Here, in the shadow of the step pyramid, the air seems to shimmer with memory. The limestone stretches wide and low across the desert, where tombs, shafts, and ruined walls lie tangled in time. This is where Egypt's story begins. And yet, amid the countless names etched into the rock, one name remains conspicuously absent: Imhotep, architect, priest, sage, physician. A man so revered that centuries after his death, he would be deified, one of the few non-royals in Egyptian history to achieve such status. His name was invoked in healing temples. His wisdom echoed through time. And yet, his final resting place has never been found. How can it be that the tomb of one of ancient Egypt's most influential figures remains missing? Imhotep served under Pharaoh Dahshur during the Third Dynasty, around 2700 BCE. He is traditionally credited as the mastermind behind the Step Pyramid, the world's first large-scale stone monument, and a design that would inspire all future pyramids. But Imhotep was far more than an architect. He was a polymath, a high priest of Heliopolis, a physician so advanced that later Greeks associated him with Asclepius, their god of medicine. In a culture that revered knowledge, Imhotep was its living embodiment. And yet, for all his recorded achievements, the trail of his body vanishes into the desert. Most Egyptologists believe Imhotep would have been buried near the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, a place intimately tied to his life's work. The region is a labyrinth of tombs, shafts, and subterranean galleries stretching for miles beneath the sand. Some speculate that his tomb may lie beneath the sprawling complex of Djoser's pyramid itself, hidden in chambers that have yet to be excavated. Others point to the nearby necropolis of high officials, vast, multi-level tombs carved deep into the bedrock, many of which remain unexplored. In the 20th century, various expeditions attempted to locate his tomb, with limited success. In the 1990s, a promising lead emerged: a shaft tomb discovered near the Serapeum, long buried beneath rubble and sealed for millennia. Inside, archaeologists found remains of high-ranking individuals, inscriptions, and ritual objects, but no definitive sign of Imhotep himself. The deeper chambers were flooded or collapsed, forcing excavations to halt. Why would such a towering figure leave behind no monument, no sarcophagus, no shrine? Was his tomb simply lost to time, destroyed by erosion, looters, or shifting sands? Or was it hidden, deliberately? Some believe Imhotep's burial was meant to be concealed, that his knowledge, his status, perhaps even his physical remains, were protected not with grandeur, but with secrecy. Could his tomb hold more than bones? Could it contain scrolls, diagrams, or architectural records from the earliest dynasties? Writings that preserved not just the design of pyramids, but the sacred geometry, cosmology, and medical insight of a mind far ahead of its time. Others venture further still. To them, Imhotep represents a bridge between divine and mortal, between technology and myth. His reputation in later periods, especially in the Greco-Roman era, only deepens the mystery. By then, he had become a demigod of healing. Temples were built in his name. Pilgrims traveled to his sanctuaries, seeking cures and visions. Was this simply reverence, or memory of something real, something lost? The absence of his tomb is not just a gap in archaeology, It is a void in the story of Egypt itself. We have the tombs of kings, generals, and merchants, but not of the man who may have changed the course of history with stone. And yet, the clues may still lie buried. In recent years, with new technologies, ground-penetrating radar, 3D scanning, and remote sensing, Saqqara is slowly revealing more of its hidden depths. Beneath its familiar sands are countless unopened shafts, many of which plunge into darkness, unexamined since the days of the ancients. Could one of them lead to Imhotep? Could his tomb, untouched and intact, still lie below our feet, waiting? Perhaps the answer is not in what we've found, but in what we've overlooked. In the small anomalies, the sealed corridors, the unfinished chambers beneath known temples, or in the oral traditions and priestly records long dismissed as legend. Imhotep was not just a builder, he was a thinker, a visionary, a man of such influence that his shadow stretches from the Old Kingdom to the pages of Greek philosophy. His absence is more than a mystery, it's an echo, one that beckons us still. So we ask, in this vast desert of time, what tomb remains sealed not by accident, but by design? What knowledge sleeps beneath the sands of Saqqara, buried with the man who built the world's first pyramid? And when, if ever, will he rise again, not in stone, but in memory? Let's keep searching. The ancient earth has not yet given up all its secrets. From the search for Imhotep's lost tomb, an echo of wisdom buried deep beneath Saqqara, we now drift forward in time toward the golden sands of the 18th dynasty, a time of radical change, of spiritual upheaval, and at the heart of it, a queen whose beauty became legend and whose fate remains one of Egypt's most enduring enigmas. Nefertiti. Her name means the beautiful one has come, and indeed, she arrived like a vision, poised, radiant, and powerful. The bust of Nefertiti, discovered in Amarna in 1912, captures her with breathtaking grace. High cheekbones, slender neck, serene expression frozen in time. It is among the most iconic artifacts of ancient Egypt, celebrated for its artistry, and for the mystery it conceals. For while her image endures, her story does not. Nefertiti rose to prominence as the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, a king whose reign turned Egyptian tradition on its head. Akhenaten abandoned the gods of old and declared sole devotion to the Aten, the sun disk, a singular, abstract deity of light and life. Together, Akhenaten and Nefertiti ruled from a new capital, Akhetaten, modern-day Amarna, and ushered in a brief but dramatic era of religious revolution. Nefertiti was not a silent consort. She was a visible and active partner in this transformation. Her name appears on official inscriptions. She is depicted in scenes of worship, diplomacy, and even warfare. At times, she is shown wearing a pharaoh's crown. She was, by all accounts, the most powerful queen of her age. And then, she vanished. Around year 12 of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti disappears from the historical record. No inscriptions, no statues, no depictions, no mention in court documents, temple reliefs, or tombs. It is as if she were erased. And with her disappearance, questions multiply. What happened to Nefertiti? Some scholars believe she died, perhaps suddenly, during a plague that swept through the royal court. Others suggest she fell from political favor, a casualty of the growing instability that surrounded Akhenaten's radical reforms. Still others wonder if she changed her name and identity entirely, stepping into a role that would defy every expectation. One of the most provocative theories proposes that Nefertiti did not die at all, but instead became pharaoh. A figure known as Neferuaten appears briefly in the years following Akhenaten's death, ruling Egypt before the boy king Tutankhamun ascended the throne. This pharaoh bore names associated with Nefertiti and adopted both male and female attributes in royal inscriptions. Could Nefertiti have ruled in secret, disguised behind a new name and title? Was Egypt briefly ruled by a female king whose memory was later suppressed? Another theory goes further still, that Nefertiti was in fact Smenkhkare, a mysterious co-regent or short-lived pharaoh whose identity remains uncertain. Some suggest Smenkhkare was Nefertiti in male regalia. Others believe he was her son or son-in-law. But once again, the trail fades into confusion. Even her tomb, like that of Imhotep, remains undiscovered. No funerary texts, no mummy, no sarcophagus. Despite extensive excavations in the Valley of the Kings and later searches around Amarna, no burial site has been definitively linked to Nefertiti. Some researchers believe her tomb was unfinished or hidden. Others suggest she was quietly interred in a royal cache, her name removed by later rulers, seeking to erase the memory of Akhenaten's heresy. In 2015, a new spark of hope emerged. British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves proposed that behind the north wall of Tutankhamun's tomb, there may lie a hidden chamber, possibly the lost burial of Nefertiti. Scans appeared to show anomalies in the wall structure, suggestive of sealed doorways. The idea ignited global excitement. Could she have been buried in secret, right beside the most famous tomb in history? But subsequent scans were inconclusive. The theory remains unproven. The door, if it exists, remains unopened. And so, the mystery lingers. Nefertiti's sudden disappearance is not merely a historical gap. It is a disruption in one of the most transformative periods in Egyptian history. A queen who helped reshape the gods, who stood beside a revolutionary king, who may have ruled as pharaoh, and yet whose end is unknown. Was she erased by successors trying to restore the old order? Was her burial intentionally concealed to protect her from damnatio memoriae, the erasure of a name from history? Or did she, like the Aten she worshipped, fade with the setting sun? Even today, her bust gazes out from behind museum glass in Berlin, eyes forever looking forward, beautiful, unyielding, silent. But somewhere, perhaps beneath the sand, or within a sealed chamber, or in an inscription yet to be uncovered, her story waits. Who was she, really? A queen? A king? A visionary caught in the tide of empire? And will we ever know what became of Nefertiti, the beautiful one who came and vanished? As we press further into the shadows of Egypt's past, the winds carry her name still, whispered across the centuries, unanswered. From the silent enigma of Nefertiti's disappearance, where the line between queen and pharaoh blurs, we now descend deeper into the unseen world of ancient Egypt, a realm not of stone and sand, but of secrets whispered through symbols, incantations, and guarded knowledge. A realm where the boundary between divine wisdom and forbidden power was thin and closely watched. At the center of this hidden world is a name wrapped in mystery, the Book of Thoth. Not a book in the modern sense, not one we can hold or browse or study in full. It is more a legend, a thread that runs through the heart of Egyptian magic, mystery, and myth. A book said to have been written by the god Thoth himself, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, lord of language, mathematics, astronomy, and knowledge, the divine recorder of truth. But what was this book, and did it ever truly exist? The earliest mentions of the Book of Thoth appear not in stone inscriptions or temple walls, but in a series of later texts, papyri from the Greco-Roman period, often written in Demotic script or preserved through Hellenistic interpretations of Egyptian lore. They speak of a book hidden deep within the Nile Valley, buried in a secret location, usually a tomb, sometimes beneath the earth or behind magical wards. A book that contains the secrets of the gods, how to speak to animals, control the winds and the waters, see the gods themselves, and even raise the dead. But those who read it, the legends warn, do so at great cost. In one version of the tale, a priest king named Nefertiti recovers the Book of Thoth after a perilous quest. He reads it aloud, and in doing so, gains divine knowledge. But the gods punish him. His wife and child die. He is cursed. Even in death, he clutches the book, unwilling to let it go. In later versions, other seekers try to find it, each lured by the promise of wisdom, and each meeting ruin. But these are myths, aren't they? Historians and Egyptologists interpret the Book of Thoth as symbolic, a metaphor for the sacred texts used by priests, manuals of ritual, healing, and the alignment of the soul with Ma'at, the cosmic order. Indeed, many texts attributed to the wisdom of Thoth exist in fragments, spells from the coffin texts, the Book of the Dead, and the pyramid texts, all composed to guide the deceased through the afterlife. But the Book of Thoth, as described in the legends, seems different. It's not about death, but power. Not about guidance, but mastery. Could such a text have existed? A real manuscript, kept secret, passed down in hushed circles among the elite priests of Heliopolis or Hermopolis, where Thoth was most revered. If it did, what would it have contained? Some believe the Book of Thoth might have been a coded name for a now-lost compendium of ancient science, astronomy, geometry, medicine, accumulated over generations and preserved in symbolic form. Others link it to esoteric schools of thought, arguing that the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, the initiations performed in the temples of Karnak, Edfu, or Dendera, all drew from this sacred core of forbidden knowledge. In later centuries, the legend of Thoth was transformed and reborn in new traditions. The Greeks identified him with Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, and out of this fusion arose the Hermetica, a series of mystical and philosophical texts that would inspire alchemists, magicians, and secret societies across Europe and the Islamic world. But was this just cultural reinvention or preservation? If the original Book of Thoth was ever real, its form may have shifted, disguised, fragmented, hidden in plain sight. Some researchers speculate that parts of it survive, encrypted within other ancient manuscripts or temple reliefs, meant only for those with the key to unlock its meanings. But the most tantalizing question is not where it is, but what it could do. Was it truly a repository of supernatural power? Or did it encode knowledge so advanced, so out of place in its time, that it appeared magical to those who encountered it? Ancient atomic theory, sound resonance, vibrational healing, energy manipulation, concepts that seem modern, but which some believe trace their roots back to Egypt's forgotten texts. Others urge caution. The danger, they say, lies not in the book itself, but in what we project onto it. In using the idea of the Book of Thoth as a mirror, reflecting our longing for a perfect, hidden wisdom that could explain the unknown. A desire to believe that somewhere, someone once held all the answers. And yet, the story endures. From the temples of Thoth to the vaults of Alexandria, from medieval grimoires to modern occult philosophy, the Book of Thoth appears, disappears, and reappears again, like a ghost following the curious. Did it ever exist? Or was it always meant to remain just out of reach? Perhaps, like Thoth himself, scribe of the gods, guardian of secrets, the book was never meant to be read, but remembered. A symbol of knowledge so profound, it can only be pursued, never possessed. And so we ask, was the Book of Thoth truly written in ink? Or only in the imagination of those brave enough to seek what cannot be seen? As we continue our descent into Egypt's unexplained past, the pages turn ever so slowly. And somewhere, beneath stone or story, a truth still waits to be found. From the elusive pages of the Book of Thoth, where ancient knowledge flickers like torchlight on stone, we now move deeper into the heart of sacred Egypt. Past the known temples, beyond the ceremonial scripts and orderly tombs, lies a place that feels out of time. A place submerged in stillness, carved into the bedrock itself. Here, beneath the sands of Abydos, partially sunken and weathered by rising groundwater, stands one of the most enigmatic monuments in all of Egypt, the Osirion. At first glance, it appears unlike any temple or structure nearby. Massive granite blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, rest with silent defiance in a trench-like enclosure. The architecture is stark, megalithic, and strangely minimal. The Osirion lacks the ornate carvings, the vibrant reliefs, and the narrative inscriptions that adorn the adjacent temple of Seti I. Instead, it speaks in shadows and weight, in scale, in presence. The temple is named after Osiris, the god of death and rebirth, lord of the underworld. Fitting, perhaps, for a structure so deeply embedded in the earth. But what is it, really? Mainstream archaeology tells us the Osirion was built during the reign of Seti I in the 13th century BCE as part of his grand temple complex. It lies directly behind the main temple, connected by a long passage. According to this view, Seti constructed the Osirion as a symbolic tomb for Osiris, a ceremonial space to honor the myth of death and resurrection. But this explanation raises as many questions as it answers. Why does the architectural style of the Osirion differ so drastically from Seti's own temple? Why does it more closely resemble the ancient core of the Valley Temple at Giza, or the foundations of the Sphinx enclosure, structures thought to be far older? And why use such colossal blocks when the rest of the temple complex was built with far smaller stones? The granite used in the Osirion was quarried far to the south, in Aswan, over 600 kilometers away. Transporting such immense stones through the Nile and placing them with precision into a subterranean trench would have required extraordinary planning and resources. Yet, no inscriptions on site credit Seti I or any New Kingdom pharaoh with the construction. Seti's temple is richly decorated. The Osirion is silent. Some scholars have speculated that the Osirion predates Seti's reign by centuries, possibly millennia, and that he merely uncovered it, integrated it into his temple, and retroactively gave it purpose. There are no definitive inscriptions to prove this, but the style and erosion patterns have led some to suggest a much earlier origin, potentially reaching back into the Pre-Dynastic or Old Kingdom periods. Was the Osirion a sacred site long before Seti arrived? And if so, who built it? Some theorists propose the Osirion as a relic of a lost technological age, an energy temple aligned with Earth's telluric currents or used for sound resonance, given the acoustic properties of its granite chambers. Others see in it a symbolic or initiatory structure, tied to mystery schools that may have existed in ancient Egypt, rites of passage performed underground, symbolizing the death and rebirth of the soul. There are even more fringe ideas, that the Osirion is a surviving fragment of a forgotten civilization, older than dynastic Egypt, that it was built during a period of global cataclysm, and that its sunken form was not symbolic, but the result of rising water tables and floods in the distant past. While these ideas remain speculative, the enigma persists. No mummies have been found here, no treasure, no funerary objects, just waterlogged corridors, impossibly large stones, and the overwhelming sensation of stepping into something far more ancient than it should be. Curiously, a single inscription was later added to the site, long after the original structure was built. It depicts the flower of life, a geometric symbol composed of overlapping circles. It appears in cultures around the world, from Mesopotamia to India, often associated with sacred geometry, creation, and the structure of the universe. Its presence here adds yet another layer of intrigue. Was this symbol etched by later pilgrims, recognizing the Osirians' ancient power? Or was it part of the original design, an echo of a knowledge that reached far beyond Egypt's borders? Today, the Osirion lies partially flooded, its floor submerged beneath still water. The reflections of its megalithic stones ripple gently with every breath of wind. Tourists rarely visit. It remains overshadowed by the more famous monuments of the Nile. And yet, for those who seek it, the Osirion offers something else, a feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, the timeline is not as linear as we think. Could it be that the origins of Egyptian civilization stretch further back than we dare admit? That some monuments were not built in the age of pyramids, but remembered from even earlier times? And if the Osirion is a remnant, what else remains, buried beneath layers of myth and stone? Perhaps the answer is not just in what we find, but in what endures, silent and unclaimed, deep in the earth. And so the Osirion waits, half in shadow, half in light, its purpose unknown, its builders unnamed, its secrets still sealed in stone. From the submerged silence of the Osirion at Abydos, where megaliths lie still as if echoing a time long forgotten, we now journey north, across the desert, past the shifting dunes and quiet necropolises, to a site rarely spoken of, but no less enigmatic. In the shadow of the bent pyramid at Dahshur, an odd and unsettling mystery waits, not in grandeur, but in absence, not in what is visible, but in what remains unexplained. Here, hidden beneath the sand and far from the polished narratives of mainstream history, lie the so-called black boxes of Dahshur. They are not ornate, not inscribed with the tales of gods and kings, no scenes of sacrifice or celestial voyages, just smooth, featureless monoliths, dark, geometric, and eerily precise. Dozens of them, carved from solid blocks of basalt and granite, many buried within subterranean chambers, aligned in silence. Each box weighs an astonishing 60 to 80 tons, their lids alone estimated at 15 tons or more. The interiors are hollowed out with sharp internal angles and mirror-like finishes. The geometry is nearly perfect, right angles machined into hard stone that resists even modern metal tools. And there are no tool marks, no signs of chisel or hammer, just flawless cuts in some of the hardest material on Earth. Why were they made? How were they made? Mainstream Egyptology offers a tentative explanation. The boxes were sarcophagi, massive burial containers intended for the sacred Apis bulls, worshipped in early dynastic religion as manifestations of divine power. In this view, the boxes served a ritual purpose, sealed and buried to honor these animals in death, just as the Serapeum at Saqqara did centuries later. But this explanation has its limits. First, many of the boxes are empty, entirely devoid of bones, grave goods, or inscriptions. If they were designed for burials, where are the remains? Why leave them unmarked? And why go to such extraordinary lengths of precision and scale for animals, when many royal tombs were constructed with far less effort? Second, the location itself. Dahshur is best known for its pyramids, the bent and the red, both attributed to Pharaoh Sneferu. But these subterranean boxes, tucked away and structurally isolated, feel disconnected. They are not placed within grand ceremonial spaces. They are buried, hidden, almost as if someone intended them not to be seen. Could there be another purpose? Some researchers have drawn parallels between the black boxes and the granite containers found in the Serapeum of Saqqara, structures that also raise questions of scale, method, and function. Others go further, suggesting that these boxes were not funerary objects at all, but machines, devices of unknown purpose, built not to honor the dead, but to harness something: energy, resonance, perhaps even consciousness itself. It is here, at the crossroads of archaeology and mystery, that the theories multiply. One idea posits that the boxes were resonance chambers, structures designed to interact with sound frequencies, creating harmonic effects that altered perception or consciousness. The acoustics within the granite interiors are remarkable. A whisper becomes a hum. A voice echoes and transforms. Could ancient Egyptians, or an earlier culture, have used these effects in initiation rites or altered states of awareness? Another theory suggests the boxes were part of an ancient technological system, not in the modern sense of machinery, but as instruments aligned with Earth's energy grids, used to balance, store, or redirect subtle energies. The lack of inscriptions in this interpretation becomes meaningful. The boxes were not made for human eyes or rituals. They were built for function, precise, deliberate, and quiet. Yet others believe the boxes point to a lost epoch of Egyptian history, a pre-dynastic time when knowledge of stoneworking, geometry, and sacred engineering far surpassed what we currently understand. That the boxes were inherited, not created, by the dynastic Egyptians. That they are survivors of something older, something erased. And yet, for all the speculation, the boxes remain silent. No records describe their creation. No tools have been found nearby that explain their perfection. No pharaoh claims them. They are massive, deliberate, and anonymous. Their only voice is their presence. In the cool, narrow corridors beneath Dahshur, where dust hangs in the air and light struggles to enter, the black boxes seem to pulse with a quiet authority. They are not broken, not damaged. They endure, untouched by time, as though waiting. What were they built for? Why do they exist in such a remote and buried context? And how could a civilization, more than 4,000 years ago, shape granite and basalt with such impossible precision, without leaving behind a trace of the tools or the knowledge used to do so? Perhaps we are asking the wrong questions. Perhaps the answers lie not in their material, but in the silence around them. The black boxes of Dahshur are not meant to impress. They do not dazzle like golden masks or painted tombs. They do something far more unsettling. They resist explanation. They sit beneath the earth, massive and mute, daring us to reconsider what we think we know about the past. And so we wonder, were these boxes tombs or instruments? Are they remnants of forgotten rituals or forgotten science? And most haunting of all, what, if anything, were they meant to contain? As we move deeper into Egypt's unexplained mysteries, the questions only multiply. And the desert, as always, keeps its secrets. From the shadowy chambers of Dahshur, where the silent black boxes rest in perfect darkness, we now shift our gaze to another corner of ancient Egypt, one not carved in stone, but wrapped in linen, a realm of offerings and preservation, of ritual and reverence. And yet, among the many thousands of mummified remains recovered over the centuries, a strange few stand apart. Not because of what they contain, but because of what they do not. These are the strange mummified creatures of ancient Egypt. They emerge from dusty storerooms and forgotten tombs, small bundles wrapped in intricate patterns, tucked into jars, boxes, or even miniature sarcophagi. At first glance, they appear to be sacred animals, cats, ibises, falcons, common offerings placed in temples and necropolises by worshippers hoping to win divine favor. Indeed, millions of animal mummies were created throughout Egyptian history, often buried in mass graves dedicated to specific gods. But these are different. Some have been found with no recognizable anatomy at all, no bones, no organs, no trace of the creature they supposedly contain, just linen, sometimes filled with mud, or twigs, or small stones. Others contain bones, but they are mismatched. Skulls from one species, limbs from another, or fragments that don't belong to any known animal. And a rare few defy classification entirely. Elongated skulls, strange cranial sutures, asymmetrical features that do not match the remains of any documented creature, ancient or modern. What are these things? Were they symbolic, ritual placeholders when no animal was available? Or were they something else, an echo of beliefs, legends, or perhaps encounters with the unknown? Mainstream Egyptology tends to view the misformed or empty mummies as a result of mass production. As demand for votive offerings grew, especially during the late period and the Greco-Roman era, animal cults became industries. Temples employed workers to breed, kill, and mummify animals at scale. In such a system, quality control may have lapsed. A few empty wrappings, a few creative substitutions, perhaps inevitable. But some researchers find that explanation incomplete. In 2015, high-resolution CT scans were conducted on hundreds of animal mummies from collections across the UK. The results were astonishing. Up to 1/3 were completely empty. Another third contained partial remains, and only a small percentage contained complete animals. Yet many of these mummies had been sealed, decorated, and buried with the same care as fully preserved specimens. Why go to such lengths to wrap nothing? Could the absence itself have been intentional? In Egyptian belief, symbolic acts held as much power as physical ones. A statue of a god could embody the god itself. A painted eye could see. Could an empty mummy embody the essence of a creature or a spirit? Some scholars suggest these mummies were not meant to hold animals, but ideas. They were offerings of form, not flesh, a symbolic gesture to a god, acknowledging presence through absence. But then, there are the others, the ones that challenge even symbolic logic. Among them are mummies with long, narrow heads and oversized eye sockets, others with vertebrae that do not match any known species. A few contain what appear to be fetal remains, but not human and not animal either. In one documented case, a mummy once believed to hold a crocodile hatchling was revealed through scanning to contain something with an entirely different structure. The bones were unlike anything in the surrounding ecological context. These anomalies are rare and fragile. Many were discovered in the 19th and early 20th centuries, often dismissed, discarded, or forgotten. Others were labeled curiosities, oddities to be tucked away in museum basements. But as scanning technology improves, more of these bundles are being re-examined, and the questions grow deeper. Were these strange mummies the result of misidentification, overzealous preservation, or hoaxes crafted for profit in antiquity? Or did they serve a different, more esoteric purpose? Some researchers point to ancient texts, fragments from the Book of the Heavenly Cow, the Amduat, or the Coffin texts, that speak of beings not quite human, not quite divine, of guardian creatures in the underworld, of star-born beings who walked the sky with Ra, of forms that shift between states. Were these metaphors or memories? Others consider the role of hybrids in Egyptian mythology. The gods themselves were often depicted with mixed features, human torsos, animal heads, wings, and tails. Could these strange mummies be ritual representations of such beings, or attempts to embody a form that transcended natural boundaries? And then there are those who venture even further, suggesting the possibility, however distant, that some of these forms were based on real encounters, that ancient Egypt may have had knowledge of species now extinct, or that, in their long history, the Egyptians came into contact with something else. These ideas remain speculative. There is no proof, only fragments, bones that don't belong, wrappings that conceal more than they reveal, objects sealed and buried with sacred intent, but without clear purpose. Today, in museum laboratories and under scanning devices, these mysterious mummies continue to be studied. Each one offers a riddle, tangled in linen, soaked in resin, shaped by beliefs we may never fully understand. What were the ancient priests wrapping? Were they preserving the body of an animal, the spirit of an idea, or the shape of something far stranger? And what might we find if we unwrapped the past, thread by thread? As we follow these forgotten bundles into the unknown, we are left with a haunting realization that some mysteries were never meant to be solved, only remembered. And Egypt, as always, remembers, wrapped in silence, sealed in shadow, waiting. From the strange, mummified creatures wrapped in mystery and time, we now step out into a broader landscape, not a tomb, not a temple, but a kingdom lost to both sand and sea. A place known to the ancient Egyptians as a land of wonder, abundance, and sacred connection. A place they called Punt. The land of Punt was real, or at least the Egyptians believed it was. They wrote about it in vivid detail, its people, its treasures, its gods. They carved its ships into the walls of temples. They painted scenes of exotic animals, incense trees, and golden goods brought back from its distant shores. But despite all this, its location has never been found. Not a single structure, not a ruin, not one definitive artifact outside Egypt. Where was Punt? To understand this mystery, we begin in the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari, nestled in the cliffs of Luxor. Here, in one of the most detailed and celebrated reliefs of the New Kingdom, we find the story of a grand expedition, one of the earliest recorded seafaring journeys in history. Led by Queen Hatshepsut's fleet during the 15th century BCE, it was said to have traveled south beyond the Red Sea to this elusive land. The reliefs show lush terrain, palm trees, incense groves, myrrh-bearing trees uprooted and brought back in baskets, strange animals like baboons and giraffes, and curious stilt houses raised above the ground. The people of Punt are shown with distinctive features and garments. Their queen, unusually corpulent, was rendered with care and respect. The entire scene suggests not conquest, but reverence, trade, diplomacy, ritual. The Egyptians called Punt Ta Netjer, the land of the god. They believed it was the source of sacred incense, especially frankincense and myrrh, used in temple offerings and embalming rites. Punt was more than a trading partner. It was a place of spiritual significance. But where did it go? Scholars have debated this for centuries. Some place Punt in modern-day Eritrea or Somalia. Others argue for southern Sudan, or even as far afield as Yemen. DNA analysis on mummified baboons brought from Punt, found in Egyptian tombs, suggests origins along the eastern African coast. But no archaeological site has ever been definitively linked to the land of Punt. No cities, no inscriptions, no burial grounds. How can a land so often visited, so clearly described, vanish so completely? One theory suggests that Punt was never a fixed location, but a region, more a maritime trade network than a single kingdom. This could explain the variety of goods and animals depicted in the reliefs. Perhaps it was a string of ports scattered along the Horn of Africa, bound together by ancient routes lost to time. Another theory suggests that Egypt's records were not meant to be literal geography, that Punt, as the land of the god, might have held symbolic meaning, its lushness, its animals, its incense, all signifiers of the divine. In this view, Punt becomes part history, part myth, a sacred origin point for ritual materials, an axis where the earthly and divine worlds touched. And yet, there are details too specific to ignore. The ships, the houses on stilts, the gifts brought back, the names, the faces. These are not metaphors. These are logistics, evidence of contact, exchange, travel. Were these journeys fabricated, exaggerated, or based on older, forgotten voyages? Or did the Egyptians truly sail down the Red Sea, far beyond the reach of most ancient empires, and encounter a culture so rich and vital that they immortalized it in temple stone? Could Punt be one of the world's first lost civilizations? Some fringe theories suggest just that. They propose that Punt may have been part of a now submerged culture, its ports and cities claimed by the rising seas of millennia past. Others suggest it may have been destroyed by climate shifts, conflict, or economic collapse, erased before it could leave ruins we would recognize. There is even speculation that Punt's sacred connection to the gods might hint at something deeper, something esoteric, that it was not merely a place of trade, but of knowledge, a holder of wisdom older than Egypt itself, the source of rituals, texts, or even spiritual practices that predate dynastic religion. But without ruins, without maps, without more than the Egyptian voice to guide us, we are left with fragments, reliefs, echoes. What we do know is this: the Egyptians remembered Punt with reverence. They honored it in temples. They retraced its roots. They never claimed to have conquered it. Instead, they returned from it changed. And that may be the greatest clue of all. What kind of place inspires a civilization to carve its image in stone, not as an enemy, but as an equal, as a partner, as a place of gods? Perhaps Punt is not entirely lost. Perhaps traces of it lie buried beneath modern cities, or along ancient riverbeds, or beneath the sands of Eastern Africa, waiting to be uncovered. Or perhaps it survives only in memory, in the reliefs of Deir el-Bahari, in the perfumes of ancient altars, in the questions we still ask. Where was Punt? Why was it sacred? And what did the Egyptians see there that made them believe it was divine? The desert holds its silence, the sea, its depths, and the land of Punt, if it ever truly existed, remains just out of reach, like a story remembered, but never fully told. From the elusive land of Punt, remembered in fragrant offerings and sacred inscriptions, we return once again to the heart of Egypt's necropolis, Saqqara, a place where the sands bury not only the dead, but the memory of what once lived. Here, amid the tombs of high priests and sacred animals, between the stepped pyramids and labyrinthine tunnels, lies a mystery rarely spoken of outside academic circles. A mystery carved not in stone, but in bone. It is known simply as the Tomb of the Unknown Animal. Discovered in the early 2000s near the Anubian, a vast catacomb complex devoted to Anubis, god of mummification and protector of the dead. This burial site was, at first, unremarkable. One of many tombs among thousands, nestled in the arid rock of Saqqara's sacred ground. It was believed to house yet another votive animal, a ritual offering to appease the gods, likely a jackal, perhaps a dog. But when archaeologists unearthed the remains inside, they realized they were looking at something different, something unfamiliar. The tomb, sealed for over 2,000 years, contained a large sarcophagus crafted from limestone, adorned with simple but precise inscriptions invoking protection and reverence. It bore no name, no pharaoh's title, no dedication to a known animal deity. Just offerings, carefully arranged, canopic jars, amulets, broken vessels, and linen fragments. At its center lay a skeleton, carefully wrapped, partially mummified, and distinctly odd. The creature had elongated limbs, a broad, deep ribcage. Its skull, while vaguely canine, bore unusual features. Its jaw structure, the arrangement of its teeth, the shape of its orbital cavities. It was too large to be a jackal, too gracile to be a lion, and unlike any species of wild dog, cat, or hyena native to Egypt. Initial reports hesitated to identify it. Some called it an unusually preserved hound. Others speculated it was an imported animal, possibly brought from Nubia or beyond. But nothing in its physiology matched known regional species, and attempts to classify it led only to more confusion. Was this a mythical representation? A chimera stitched together, like some votive mummies had been, from the remains of different animals? Scans said no. The skeleton was complete, articulated, and genetically consistent. Not a fabrication, not a hybrid. A whole, singular creature. So, what was it? DNA analysis was attempted, but the results were inconclusive, damaged by time and ritual preservatives. Radiocarbon dating placed the burial in the late Ptolemaic period, somewhere between 300 and 100 BCE. A time when Egyptian religion was under transformation, blending with Greek thought and mystery cults. A time when symbols became layered, meanings obscured, and rites increasingly esoteric. Was this animal revered as a unique spiritual being? A singular entity enshrined as sacred? There is precedent for unusual animals being treated as divine. The Apis bull, the Menivis bull, the Bennu bird, each associated with cycles of death and rebirth, each believed to be earthly vessels of celestial forces. But those animals were known, catalogued, ritualized. This one was not. There are no hieroglyphs describing such a creature. No myth, no bestiary, no mention in the coffin texts or the pyramid texts, no parallels in known iconography. And yet, it was buried with reverence, purpose, ceremony. Why? Some suggest it may have been a one-of-a-kind birth, an animal with genetic anomalies, born malformed yet seen as divine. Perhaps a sign from the gods, a wonder of nature mistaken for a messenger of the beyond. Others propose it may have been a relic of a long-extinct species, preserved in isolated pockets of desert or riverbank, worshipped by a localized cult whose records have not survived. Still others ask a more unsettling question. Could this have been an animal unknown not just to Egypt, but to science? It's a question that lingers in the minds of those who have studied the tomb. One not easily answered and often sidestepped in formal publications. Egypt, after all, is no stranger to enigmatic remains, from the mismatched mummies of votive pits to the hybrid deities carved in temple walls. Yet here, in this quiet chamber beneath Saqqara, there is no mythic mask, no symbolic blending, just a body, whole and real, and the marks of a culture that treated it as sacred. Why the secrecy? Why the absence of inscriptions when the Egyptians were so meticulous in recording their beliefs? Was it too sacred to name? Too anomalous to explain? Or was it part of a tradition now erased, one that remembered creatures we have long since forgotten? The tomb has since been resealed, the remains studied, catalogued, and preserved. But the mystery endures. No definitive identity has been assigned. The creature remains in academic limbo, labeled with clinical detachment as unidentified large mammal, mummified, context, sacred burial. But beneath the data and the dust, something stirs. In a land where animals were gods and death was a doorway, what does it mean when we find a god we do not recognize? A body with no name, but a tomb all its own? Perhaps the answers are still buried. In Saqqara's forgotten corridors, in the catacombs we have yet to enter, or in the myths whispered through the dry wind, waiting to be heard again. And so we ask, was this simply an animal out of place, or a memory of a world far stranger than we know? From the tomb of the unknown creature at Saqqara, a silent guardian from a forgotten world, we now move towards something even more elusive. Not found in bone or burial, but etched in stone, visible for all to see, yet open to infinite interpretation. In the quiet sanctuaries of Egypt's ancient temples, among the processions of gods and pharaohs, there are figures that seem to whisper of something strange, something not quite human. These are the alien-like figures in temple reliefs. To the untrained eye, the walls of Egypt's temples may seem repetitive, rows of gods with animal heads, ritual offerings, and pharaohs locked in eternal triumph. But hidden in the margins, in corners half lit by time, there are carvings that do not conform. Figures with elongated skulls, large, slanted eyes, spindly limbs, bodies unlike any human or deity typically recorded in Egyptian iconography. They appear in scattered locations, at Dendera, at Abydos, at Edfu. In some cases, they are part of larger mythological scenes. In others, they stand alone or in odd isolation, partially defaced or poorly preserved, as if they were never meant to last. Who, or what, are these beings? Mainstream Egyptology tends to interpret them through the lens of symbolism and stylization. The elongated heads, for instance, could be ceremonial headdresses or artistic representations of status and divinity. Many Egyptian gods were intentionally portrayed with non-human traits, falcon heads, jackal snouts, crocodile jaws, not to reflect physical beings, but spiritual archetypes. But some of these anomalous figures go further than stylization. They are not clearly gods. They are not marked with hieroglyphs or divine crowns. Their posture, proportions, and sometimes even their placement suggest something else entirely. One of the most commonly cited examples comes from the Temple of Seti the Fern at Abydos. In a high lintel above a chamber, faint carvings appear to show what some interpret as futuristic vehicles: a helicopter, a submarine, even a flying craft. Though most scholars explain these shapes as a result of palimpsest, where newer carvings were placed over older ones, creating visual accidents, the controversy persists. To some, it is a coincidence. To others, it is a message left in plain sight. Elsewhere, at the Temple of Hathor in Dendera, the same site that houses the famed Dendera Light, there are side chambers with figures that resemble beings with oversized, almond-shaped eyes and slender, almost insectoid features. Their appearance has led some to suggest that the ancient Egyptians may have been depicting visitors from beyond this world, beings interpreted as gods by a civilization without the language to describe them otherwise. These theories are not without precedent in myth. Ancient Egyptian texts frequently reference the Netjeru, the gods who came from the stars, who walked among men in a time before kings, and who eventually returned to the heavens. The Zep Tepi, or first time, was a golden age when divine beings ruled on earth, bringing knowledge, order, and architecture. Could these gods have been more than myth? Could they have been real entities, later mythologized? It's a question that has captivated not only fringe theorists, but also scholars exploring cross-cultural patterns. From Sumerian Anunnaki to Mesoamerican sky beings, the recurring theme of advanced visitors from the stars is remarkably persistent across the world's oldest traditions. Egypt, with its advanced astronomy, precise architecture, and mysterious iconography, has often been central to this discussion. Yet the evidence remains ambiguous. The alien-like figures in Egyptian reliefs are few and far between, rare exceptions in a vast corpus of art. Some may be misinterpretations of ceremonial masks, stylized depictions of illness or deformity, or even artistic experimentation. Others may simply be errors, stone worn by wind and time into suggestive shapes, fragments mistaken for holes. Still, the question lingers. Why do some figures look so different? Why are they placed in marginal spaces, half visible, half erased? And why does Egyptian myth, so steeped in cosmic cycles and divine rulership, leave room for beings not of this earth? It is here that the mystery deepens, not in proof, but in suggestion. We are not claiming contact. We are not rewriting history. We are only observing that something unusual appears, again and again, in places designed to last forever. figures out of proportion, eyes too large, heads too long, images that don't quite belong. Are they symbolic, mythological, or are they traces of a memory the ancients tried to preserve in the only language they knew, stone? Even within traditional scholarship, the deeper questions remain open. The Egyptians viewed time as cyclical. They spoke of forgotten epochs, lost knowledge, and gods who once walked among men. Whether those gods were real, imagined, or something in between is a matter of interpretation. But the imagery they left behind continues to provoke, and perhaps that is the point. The alien-like figures in temple reliefs are not a claim. They are an invitation to look closer, to ask harder questions, to consider that the past may be stranger than we have allowed ourselves to believe. So we ask, what did the Egyptians see? What were they trying to remember? And what truths might still be hidden, just beyond the edge of the chisel? From the alien-like figures etched into ancient stone, faces and forms that challenge what we think we know, we now turn to the tools. The things that built Egypt, the objects that shaped obelisks, carved monuments, and hollowed out tombs. Or at least, they should have. For what we've found does not always match what seems to have been created. These are the anomalous tools left behind. Walk through the ruins of ancient Egypt, and you'll find yourself dwarfed by stone. Not just large stones, but impossibly smooth surfaces, sharp internal angles, perfectly drilled holes, and symmetries carved into granite and diorite, some of the hardest stones known to humankind. The statues of Ramses at Luxor, the sarcophagi in the Serapeum, the obelisks of Karnak, and the stone boxes at Dahshur. Their construction requires a level of precision that rivals modern machining. And yet, among the remains of these ancient workshops, the tools we have uncovered are surprisingly simple: copper chisels, dolerite pounding stones, stone hammers, flint blades, that's all. These are the tools Egyptologists say were used to shape thousands of tons of granite and basalt, materials that, even today, require diamond-tipped equipment to cut with ease. And while it is certainly true that copper tools can work softer limestone and dolerite balls can crush through granite with enough time and labor, the level of finesse seen in some ancient artifacts seems to stretch the boundaries of what such tools could achieve. Take, for example, the famous schist disc discovered at Saqqara, now housed in the Cairo Museum. It's a circular, finely balanced object, shaped with flanges and a central hub, made from a fragile material that would shatter under the force of crude carving. What was it? A ritual object? A part of a mechanical device? And how was it made, if only stone tools were available? Or consider the mysterious saw marks and drill cores found in places like Aswan and Giza. Long, straight cuts through hard stone. Holes drilled with spiral striations, suggesting a rotating tool that cut into granite at high speed, removing material quickly and cleanly. Engineers and machinists who have examined these cores say the evidence resembles what would be expected from modern machinery, not hand-driven copper tubes with sand as abrasive. And yet, there are no lathes, no drills, no saws, no remnants of advanced tooling, only the monuments themselves and the puzzles they pose. Could the ancient Egyptians have possessed techniques that are now lost to us? Methods of softening stone chemically? Techniques of vibrational cutting, perhaps using sound or pressure? Some researchers point to the remarkable consistency of certain shapes and boreholes, suggesting mass production or templated designs. Others argue that we underestimate what human ingenuity, patience, and vast labor forces can achieve with even the simplest tools. Indeed, Egypt's builders had access to thousands of workers, skilled artisans, a deep understanding of material properties, and a worldview in which construction was sacred, methodical, and infused with cosmic significance. But does that explain everything we see? Why are certain objects found in contexts that don't match their assumed era of production? Why do some reliefs, like those found in temples at Dendera or Edfu, depict strange devices that look more mechanical than symbolic? Why do some artifacts appear to be unfinished, as if the work had stopped mid-process, not for lack of skill, but for lack of tools? There is a growing body of work by engineers, sculptors, and machinists who have tried to recreate some of these ancient cuts using only the tools available to the Egyptians of the time. Their results are mixed. In some cases, the techniques are replicable, with enormous time and effort. In others, the results fall short. The finish isn't as clean, the geometry not as precise, and that's where the mystery lives, in the gap. Not in what could have been done, but in what was, and how little remains to explain it. If the tools used to achieve such results were simple, why have we not found more failed attempts, more crude prototypes, more intermediate stages of mastery? Instead, many of Egypt's hardest stoneworks appear fully formed, an immediate leap into complexity. Could these tools have been organic, biodegradable, or made from materials that didn't survive the ages? Could they have been borrowed, preserved knowledge from an earlier culture now lost to the desert and flood? Or were they metaphysical, techniques not based on metallurgy, but on sound, frequency, or resonance, hinted at in Egypt's deep symbolic language? We don't know. The tools we found are real. The monuments they left behind are real. But the relationship between them feels incomplete, as though one half of the equation has gone missing. And so, we are left with stones that speak more clearly than the tools that shaped them. What did the ancient Egyptians know that we no longer remember? Was it simply extraordinary craftsmanship honed across generations? Or is there something, some method, some understanding, some artifact that still lies buried, waiting to be found? The answers, as always, lie in the silence, in the tools that are too simple, in the cuts that are too clean, in the granite that speaks of hands we cannot yet explain. From the enigmatic tools left behind, silent instruments of a craft we barely comprehend, we step back to ask a deeper question. Not about what was carved or how, but about when, and more precisely, how quickly. In the fertile cradle of the Nile, surrounded by desert silence and boundless sky, something astonishing happened more than 5,000 years ago. A transformation as sudden as it was profound. A civilization emerged, not slowly, not gradually, but seemingly all at once. This is the mystery of the sudden rise of dynastic Egypt. Imagine the Nile Valley around 3200 BCE, a landscape dotted with scattered villages, small farming communities, simple mud brick homes, pottery, stone tools, and primitive rituals. There is art, but it is crude. Trade, but limited. Local chieftains rule their regions with no unified script, no large monuments, no great temples. Egypt is a land divided, culturally, politically, and linguistically. And then, something changes. Within a few generations, we see the birth of writing. Hieroglyphs appear, fully formed, complex, symbolic, and phonetic. Monumental architecture begins to rise. Massive stone structures, aligned with celestial precision, take shape along the Nile. Administrative bureaucracy, agricultural planning, taxation, national identity, and mythological frameworks all solidify in what appears to be a remarkably short span of time. The first dynasty begins. Narmer unites Upper and Lower Egypt. The Narmer palette, an elegantly carved ceremonial artifact, shows a king in full regalia, complete with crown, mace, standards, and a structured army. Not the birth of a civilization, but its announcement. How did this happen so quickly? Mainstream Egyptology describes the process as the result of long, slow developments in the prehistoric cultures of the Nile Valley, particularly the Naqada culture, which shows increasing social complexity and symbolic art over several centuries. Trade with the Levant, Mesopotamia, and Nubia introduced new materials and ideas. Elite tombs grew in complexity, authority consolidated. But still, the pace of change between 3500 and 3000 BCE remains difficult to explain. How did such a sophisticated writing system emerge without obvious precursors? Why do we find evidence of advanced surveying, resource allocation, and symbolic systems so suddenly and seemingly without a clear trail of progression? Some researchers propose that the rise of dynastic Egypt was not as abrupt as it appears, but rather that much of the earlier evidence has been lost, either to erosion, flooding, or the passage of time. The early dynasties may have codified and recorded traditions that had existed orally or through ephemeral means, on wood, cloth, or sand. Others suggest that Egypt may have inherited knowledge from an even older, forgotten civilization, one wiped out by climate change or catastrophe. In this view, the pyramids, stoneworking techniques, and mythological systems were not invented, but remembered. Echoes of a golden age passed down through the priesthood, preserved in symbolic form until conditions allowed them to resurface. Then there are the celestial theories. Ancient Egyptian cosmology speaks of the Zep Tepi, the first time when gods walked the earth and bestowed order upon chaos. Could this be a mythical recollection of an earlier high civilization, or a metaphor for an influx of knowledge passed down from an unknown source? The alignments of early monuments, such as the pyramids at Giza and the temple foundations at Abydos, suggest an intimate relationship with the stars, particularly Orion and Sirius. Was the sudden emergence of dynastic order guided by celestial principles? And what of the genetic and cultural diversity seen in the early dynasties? Some analyses of mummified remains show a mix of traits: sub-Saharan, North African, and even Mediterranean. Trade artifacts from Mesopotamia, Afghanistan, and the Levant appear in pre-dynastic tombs. The royal families, while Egyptian in tradition, show signs of influence that remain difficult to trace. Could early Egypt have been a melting pot, drawing in ideas, people, and knowledge from distant lands, converging along the Nile like a river of memory? If so, where did it all go? Why do we see such a leap forward in Dynasty 1, and then a slow climb over the centuries that follow? Why does it seem that the earliest dynastic periods possessed knowledge and symbolism that later generations sought to replicate, but never surpassed? Take the pyramids, for example. The Great Pyramid, attributed to the 4th dynasty, remains the most precise, the most aligned, the most massive. Later pyramids are smaller, rougher, less durable. Why would the greatest feats come at the beginning, not the end? Could Egypt's rise have been a legacy rather than a beginning? A rekindling, not a spark? It's a theory that continues to stir debate. Some see it as romanticism, others as a legitimate puzzle still unanswered by archaeology. But whether we view Egypt's emergence as an evolution or a revolution, the fact remains: something extraordinary happened in a remarkably short time. A civilization appeared, complex, ordered, symbolic, and enduring. Its myths, its monuments, its mathematics and metaphysics have outlived every empire since. And yet, its origin remains strangely veiled. Why did writing emerge fully formed? Why did kingship and cosmic order appear together? And what, if anything, came before the pharaohs? The sands of Egypt have preserved so much, but perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in what we can see, but in what came just before. What was Egypt before it became Egypt? And how much of that story still waits, buried beneath the foundations of time? From the sudden rise of dynastic Egypt an improbable leap into sophistication and cosmic order, we now turn to the symbols that made it all visible. The inscriptions that danced across temple walls, that wrapped the dead in spells, and that carried the names of kings through eternity. Delicate, intricate, and alive with meaning, they are unlike any writing system in the ancient world. These are the hieroglyphs, and their origin remains one of Egypt's deepest enigmas. Wander into the great temple of Karnak, or descend into the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, and you'll find them everywhere, etched into stone, painted in color, carved in bas relief. Birds, eyes, reeds, spirals, arms, jackals, stars. Each one part of a system that is at once visual, phonetic, symbolic, and spiritual. A language not only of record, but of ritual. Not just read, but activated. The Egyptians themselves called it Medu Neter, the words of the gods. But where did these words come from? According to conventional scholarship, hieroglyphs emerged around 3200 BCE, roughly in parallel with the earliest Mesopotamian cuneiform. The earliest examples appear in Naqada III tombs, with brief inscriptions on pottery shards, labels, and ivory tags, primitive by comparison to the elaborate inscriptions of later dynasties, yet unmistakably Egyptian in their composition. But this is where the puzzle begins. These earliest glyphs already contain structure, syntax, phonetic and symbolic integration. They don't appear to evolve from crude proto-writing. They arrive whole, sophisticated, purposeful. How is it that such a complex system appears so fully formed? Most writing systems, like Sumerian or Chinese, show a clear evolutionary trajectory, from pictograms to ideograms to syllabic forms. But Egyptian hieroglyphs seem to bypass this progression. There is no long sequence of trial and error, no centuries of development. Instead, we find a language system with hundreds of unique signs, operating on multiple levels at once, sometimes literal, sometimes metaphorical, sometimes numerical. Was it developed in secret? In a priestly class? In a culture whose earlier writings have simply vanished? Or did it come from somewhere else? Some scholars argue that the roots of hieroglyphic writing may lie in earlier African symbols, abstract signs found in rock art throughout the Sahara and along the Nile Valley. These markings, dating back thousands of years, hint at a long tradition of symbolic communication, now largely lost to erosion and time. Others look toward outside influences. Trade routes between Egypt and Mesopotamia were active during the Naqada period. Could early Egyptian scribes have seen writing in use elsewhere and adapted the idea to suit their own religious and cultural vision? If so, why is there no transitional form, no half-developed script bridging pictures to phonetics? Then there is the mythic perspective. The Egyptians themselves attributed the invention of writing to Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, time, and cosmic order. In their cosmology, writing was not invented by man, but bestowed by the divine. It was not a tool, but a sacred art. The priestly class who mastered it were not mere scribes. They were initiates, keepers of the unseen. This belief is embedded in the writing itself. Unlike any other ancient script, Egyptian hieroglyphs were designed to be read and seen. Each sign was a miniature work of art, echoing the sacred harmony of the universe. Even the placement of glyphs mattered, mirrored on walls to face toward the beginning of the story, arranged in grids that echoed architectural forms. Some were never meant to be spoken aloud, only to exist as a kind of cosmic code, a way to link the world of men to the world of gods. But could that belief conceal something more? Some researchers have suggested that hieroglyphs represent more than just writing. They may have encoded principles of sound, resonance, or even vibration. Ancient texts speak of names with power, of utterances that could open doors or still the heart. If Egyptian temples were harmonic structures, as some engineers and archaeologists suggest, could hieroglyphs have played a role in that? Not just language, but function? Others point to the consistency of the script across time. For over 3,000 years, the system remained largely unchanged. No significant simplification, no major reform. Even as the spoken language evolved, the writing held fast. Why? Was it reverence or necessity? What kind of society maintains a symbolic system for millennia, unless it is serving a purpose far beyond communication? And why did it vanish so completely? With the spread of Greek and later Roman influence, the temples fell silent. The last known hieroglyphic inscription dates to 394 CE. Within a generation or two, the ability to read them was gone, lost for over 1,400 years until the Rosetta Stone finally cracked the code in the 19th century. But even now, many inscriptions remain ambiguous, multi-layered, capable of being interpreted in several ways at once. Have we truly deciphered them, or just scratched the surface? Could there be deeper meanings still encoded in the glyphs, philosophical, mathematical, even metaphysical, waiting to be rediscovered? Perhaps the mystery of hieroglyphs is not that they were created, but how they were created so quickly, with such complexity, with such vision. Were they the product of a brilliant priesthood, a legacy of an older, forgotten culture, or something else entirely, something gifted, as the Egyptians themselves believed, by beings who understood the architecture of the cosmos? The glyphs remain, chiseled into granite, painted in tombs, whispered in ritual. But their origin, like the gods they once honored, has faded into myth. And so we wonder, did the first hieroglyph arise from a reed and a steady hand, or from a memory older than history itself? From the cryptic origins of hieroglyphs, symbols so complex they seem to echo a knowledge lost in time, we remain within the sacred walls of Abydos, one of the most ancient and spiritually charged sites in all of Egypt. Here, in the Temple of Seti the Frun, past grand colonnades and shadowed sanctuaries, lies a single carving, small, weathered, and partially obscured, that has sparked one of the most enduring mysteries of modern Egyptology. It is often called the helicopter carving of Abydos. Located high on a beam above a doorway in the temple's hypostyle hall, this strange relief has become a magnet for speculation. To the casual observer, it is easy to overlook, a faded patch among rows of hieroglyphic inscriptions. But look closely, and the eye is drawn to a particular set of shapes. One appears startlingly like a modern military helicopter, complete with a tail boom and rotor blades. Another resembles a tank or a submarine. A third seems to mimic the profile of a futuristic aircraft. How is this possible? At first glance, the implications are jarring. Is this evidence of ancient technological knowledge, of contact with an advanced civilization, of something not human? But before leaping to conclusions, we must consider the context. The Temple of Seti. I was constructed during the 19th dynasty, in the 13th century BCE, as a sacred site dedicated to the worship of Osiris and the divine lineage of pharaohs. The reliefs within are detailed and symbolic, filled with hymns, rituals, and royal names. The section containing the so-called helicopter is part of a king list, a record of past rulers. The glyphs are carved in typical form, stacked and arranged in registers. Yet in this single spot, the glyphs seem to break from their usual order. The lines are awkward, overlapping, the forms ambiguous. Egyptologists explain this phenomenon as an example of palimpsest, a common practice in ancient Egypt where inscriptions were recarved over time. When one pharaoh succeeded another, it was not unusual for the new king to overwrite the name of his predecessor, especially in an effort to assert legitimacy or revise history. In this case, Scholars believe the names of Seti the Fern and his son, Rameses II, were carved one atop the other. Over the centuries, as the stone weathered and eroded, parts of each inscription were revealed simultaneously, accidentally creating new, hybrid forms. Thus, the helicopter is said to be the coincidental result of layered hieroglyphs, an illusion of modern shapes born from erosion and over-carving. But not everyone is convinced. Some argue that the overlapping explanation, while plausible, does not fully account for the crispness of the lines or the strange symmetry of the shapes. If this were simply a palimpsest, why do the resulting forms so clearly resemble modern machines? Why here, in a temple otherwise meticulous in its design? Could it be that the shapes are not accidental, but intentional? And if so, what were they meant to represent? One theory posits that these carvings are symbolic representations, visions or concepts rendered by the priesthood during ritual trance or dream states. Ancient Egyptian cosmology was rich with metaphors for flight, for celestial boats, for divine vehicles used by the gods to travel across the heavens. Could the images represent such mythic transport, not in a literal sense, but in symbolic form? A way of describing phenomena beyond ordinary language? Others venture further. They suggest that these shapes are not mere symbols, but memories, records of technologies witnessed or preserved from a forgotten epoch, echoes of a pre-dynastic or even pre-human civilization. A technological legacy reduced to myth, preserved only in temple stone. Still more speculative are those who interpret the carving as possible evidence of ancient contact with non-human intelligence. The idea that beings from beyond Earth visited early civilizations is controversial, but persistent. In this view, the carvings are neither mistakes nor metaphors. They are representations of what was seen, recorded by the only means available to the ancients: art, symbol, and stone. Mainstream scholars caution against such interpretations. They emphasize the importance of context, of stylistic consistency, of the cultural framework in which these glyphs were carved. Ancient Egypt, after all, was a civilization of metaphor, not machines. But the mystery lingers. The carving is not a hoax. It exists. And whether one sees a helicopter or only a trick of time and erosion, it remains a singular image in a temple filled with deeply intentional art. What is it doing there? Was it truly the accidental result of layered inscriptions? Or was it meant to be ambiguous? Could the Egyptians have preserved memories of a deeper past, one that did not survive in written form, but lived on through symbol, myth, and stone? Or are we simply projecting our own technological imaginations onto shapes we long to understand? The answers may never be clear, but the carving remains, etched high above the temple floor, where shadow and sunlight play across its edges, silent, still, unexplained, a fragment of stone, or a fragment of something more. And so we ask, did the past see more than we know? And what other messages might still be hidden, just beyond the edges of translation? From the strange glyphs at Abydos, where the lines between erosion and intention blur, we now descend beneath the visible layers of Egyptian history. Deeper than the hieroglyphs on the walls, deeper than the names of kings or the rituals of the temple, into a more concealed tradition, one not meant for the masses, but for the few, the initiated, the chosen, those who walked between worlds, guided not by script, but by experience. This is the realm of the mystery schools, and the secret knowledge they may have guarded. Imagine the shadowed corridors beneath Dendera, Karnak, or Edfu, the chambers sealed to the public, accessible only to priests or royalty. Walls adorned not with stories of harvest or conquest, but with cosmic diagrams, stars, serpents, geometries, and sacred boats ferrying gods through realms of light and shadow. These were not just decorations. They were maps of the cosmos, of the self, of the soul's journey through eternity. What kind of knowledge lived here? We know that ancient Egypt was not merely a land of rituals, but of disciplines: astronomy, medicine, architecture, mathematics, all deeply woven with their theology. But beyond the outer forms, some researchers believe Egypt housed a parallel path, a hidden spiritual science passed from master to pupil over generations, never written down, always protected. The Greeks believed this. When philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato traveled to Egypt, they spoke of priesthoods who held wisdom older than time, of initiations that revealed the harmony of the universe, of temples where the soul was prepared for death, not as an end, but as a return. And they weren't alone. In the Hellenistic period, texts like the Hermetica, ascribed to Thoth, or Hermes Trismegistus, began to emerge, hinting at teachings that blurred the lines between theology, cosmology, and inner transformation. The principle of as above, so below. The belief that the divine could be mirrored in man, that the soul's ascent was not merely myth, but method. Could these writings have preserved echoes of Egypt's mystery schools? While no scroll or inscription openly describes such a school, many temples appear to have been designed for more than worship. Their layout reflects symbolic geometry: long processional paths, sequential chambers, light and darkness used with precise intent. At Edfu, texts refer to the House of Life, a sanctuary where sacred knowledge was stored and transmitted. In Abydos, beneath the Osirion, scholars have noted the unusual acoustics, resonant frequencies that amplify certain tones. Was this architecture or initiation? Some researchers believe that the mystery schools were less about doctrine and more about experience. That initiates underwent transformative rituals, guided meditations, sensory deprivation, symbolic death and rebirth. That these rites were designed to awaken the deeper faculties of the mind, to open the inner eye, to prepare the soul for the journey beyond the veil. Hints of this survive in Egyptian funerary texts. The Book of the Dead, the Amduat, and the Book of Gates all describe the soul's passage through realms of challenge and revelation. But what if these texts weren't just for the dead? What if they were instructions, allegorical maps for the living, preserved for those who had undergone the inner path? Even the gods themselves may have served dual roles: public deities for worship and private archetypes for transformation. Osiris, dismembered and reborn, represents not only the seasonal cycle, but the soul's fragmentation and reintegration. Isis, the seeker and restorer, reflects the initiate's quest. Thoth, the scribe and keeper of hidden wisdom, embodies the mastery of truth and thought. And what of the symbols carved deep into temple walls? The Djed pillar, spinal column of Osiris, or symbol of awakened energy. The Eye of Horus, medical notation, or a mnemonic for higher perception. The Ankh, not just life, but the breath of life, the key to unlocking the gates between worlds. Mainstream scholars interpret these as religious motifs, but others see a deeper layer: coded language meant to protect knowledge from misuse, revealing its meanings only to those prepared to receive it. Could the Egyptian priesthood have guarded a form of sacred science? A way of aligning the human being with cosmic law? Perhaps even techniques for achieving altered states of consciousness, using breath, sound, symbol, and geometry to transcend ordinary perception. Some point to the fact that even in later esoteric traditions, Kabbalah, alchemy, Sufism, Rosicrucianism, there are echoes of the Egyptian model. The idea that true wisdom cannot be told, only shown, that it must be experienced through silence, stillness, and symbolic death. But if these mystery schools existed, why are they so absent from the historical record? Perhaps because they were never meant to be remembered in ink or stone. Perhaps their teachings were not written, but enacted, body to body, voice to voice, within temples that were themselves living books. Perhaps the deepest truths of ancient Egypt were never public at all, but whispered in darkness, guarded not just by secrecy, but by readiness. And perhaps some of that knowledge still lingers. In glyphs we haven't yet fully understood. In rituals we dismiss as myth. In chambers beneath the temples that remain sealed and unexplored. What did the initiates of the mystery schools know? What did they see when their eyes were opened? And what might still be hidden, not only beneath the sand, but within the symbols themselves? The journey continues, deeper into the silence between stone. From the secret teachings of the mystery schools, guarded deep within the sanctums of stone, we emerge once more into the blinding sun of the Giza Plateau. The heat shimmers across golden sand. The sky arches above, vast and cloudless. And there, rising from the earth with ageless precision, stand the pyramids of Giza, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. Massive, immutable, and perfectly aligned. Yet their true alignment, some believe, lies not only in the earth, but in the stars. This is the enduring mystery of the pyramids and Orion's belt. At first glance, the pyramids appear evenly spaced, forming a diagonal across the plateau. But closer inspection reveals an irregularity. The smallest pyramid, Menkaure, is offset slightly to the east. This detail, long thought to be due to terrain or construction limitations, caught the attention of researchers looking skyward. In the 1990s, engineer and author Robert Bauval proposed a bold idea, that the three pyramids mirror the three stars of Orion's belt, Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka. He observed that the size and positioning of the pyramids correspond not only to the brightness of these stars, but also to their offset alignment in the night sky. The resemblance, he argued, was not coincidence, but design, a celestial blueprint carved into the earth. The implications were profound. Orion, in Egyptian mythology, was associated with Osiris, the god of resurrection and the afterlife. To the ancient Egyptians, Orion was not just a constellation, but a gateway, a celestial kingdom where the soul of the pharaoh would ascend and join the gods. The pyramid texts, inscribed in the inner chambers of later pyramids, speak of the pharaoh becoming a star in Orion's belt, sailing the sky as an eternal spirit. Could the Great Pyramids, then, be more than tombs? Could they be instruments designed to launch the soul, to connect the human with the divine, to recreate heaven on earth? Further support for this theory comes from astronomical modeling. If one rewinds the night sky back to around 10,500 BCE, using precessional calculations, the stars of Orion's belt align almost perfectly with the layout of the pyramids. In that same epoch, the constellation Leo would have risen due east of the Sphinx on the spring equinox. Was this intentional? A commemoration of a lost age? A memory encoded in megalithic architecture? Mainstream Egyptology remains skeptical. Traditional interpretations date the pyramids to the 4th dynasty, around 2500 BCE. No inscriptions inside the Great Pyramid confirm its purpose or date. No texts explicitly state an alignment with Orion, and the precession-based dating relies on assumptions about ancient skywatching capabilities and symbolic intent. Many scholars argue that while the Egyptians revered the stars, the pyramid placements were dictated by local geography, religious symbolism, or construction logistics, not precise stellar mapping. Yet the question persists: why this arrangement? The orientation of the pyramids is another enigma. The sides of the Great Pyramid are aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points: north, south, east, and west. So precise is the alignment that modern architects marvel at its accuracy, especially given the lack of advanced tools. Could such precision have been achieved purely through observation of the stars? Some researchers believe the ancient Egyptians used stellar techniques, tracking circumpolar stars to establish true north, and aligning structures to celestial risings and settings. If so, this reveals not only deep astronomical understanding, but a desire to embed that knowledge in stone. But the Orion theory goes further. According to some interpretations, the pyramid shafts within the Great Pyramid point toward specific stars. The southern shaft of the King's Chamber aligns with Orion's belt, the Queen's Chamber shaft with Sirius. Both were associated with divine entities, Osiris and Isis. The shafts are too narrow for a person, too deep for ventilation. Were they symbolic passageways for the soul? Stellar guides for the afterlife? And if so, why such effort? Why devote generations of planning, labor, and resources to aligning structures with stars, unless those stars held profound significance? Some suggest a more speculative possibility, that the builders of the pyramids were not merely replicating the stars, but responding to them. That the structures were part of a larger cosmic design, echoes of a forgotten science, one that saw the universe not as distant and indifferent, but as a living system interconnected with Earth. In this view, the pyramids become more than tombs, more than monuments. They become harmonics, vibrational instruments placed in resonance with the heavens. Others take a more symbolic stance, that the pyramids reflected the belief that what is above should be reflected below, that the soul, like Orion, must pass through trials, ascend through darkness, and find eternal rest among the stars. That the pyramid was not only a machine, but a myth, frozen in stone. But still, the mystery remains. Why do the pyramids mirror Orion's belt so closely? Was it accidental? A trick of pattern recognition? Or was it part of a sacred plan, one encoded in stone, passed through generations, and only now beginning to be seen? As the sun sets behind the western desert and the stars emerge in the inky blackness above Giza, Orion still rises in the sky. The three stars shine in eternal formation, casting their light across the sands, and beneath them, the pyramids wait, silent, precise, and still aligned. What message did they carry? What knowledge have they preserved? And what might we yet discover when we stop looking down and begin looking up? As the pyramids rest beneath Orion's eternal gaze, vast, silent, and mathematically aligned, we shift from the desert to the heart of the modern world, to a place that houses Egypt's many secrets, not under sand or stone, but behind glass and shadow. Inside a red brick building nestled in the chaotic energy of Cairo lies one of the most extraordinary repositories of ancient history ever assembled. This is the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, and within its halls are mysteries that few have ever truly seen. Visitors walk beneath vaulted ceilings, past golden masks, sarcophagi, statues, and shattered stelae. The treasures of Tutankhamun gleam in dim light. Mummified remains lie in hushed reverence. It is a place of awe, yet also a place of overwhelming density. With over 120,000 artifacts in its collection, and many more still uncatalogued in its storerooms, the museum is not just a public space, but a maze, a vault, a library of forgotten objects, and some of them, it seems, don't quite fit. Tucked away in back rooms, on dusty shelves, or listed under vague or generic descriptions, are items that challenge the standard narrative of Egypt's history. Objects that seem too advanced, too out of place, or simply too mysterious to explain. One such artifact is the schist disc of Sabu, discovered in the tomb of Prince Sabu of the First Dynasty. It is a precisely carved, almost mechanical-looking object made of brittle metamorphic stone, shaped like a wheel or turbine, with a central hub and three curved veined blades. No inscriptions accompany it. No parallel artifacts have been found. Scholars suggest it may have been a ceremonial object, a vessel stand, or a lotus symbol. But its form is eerily reminiscent of a modern impeller. Why would a primitive culture carve such a delicate and complex form from such difficult stone? And why just once? Then there are the granite bowls and stone vases from the pre-dynastic period, many of which are displayed in glass cabinets with little commentary. They are shaped with symmetrical precision, with narrow necks and paper-thin rims carved from granite, diorite, and other stones far harder than copper tools could easily work. Modern stonemasons who have examined them are perplexed, not because the bowls exist, but because of how they were made and in such large quantities. Some appear lathe-turned, but who had a lathe in 3000 BCE? In one overlooked corner of the museum sits a cache of miniature objects, seemingly mundane: rods, cones, discs, spirals, and tubes. Some are categorized as weights or gaming pieces. Others have no labels at all. Yet a few researchers believe these may have been parts of something more complex: fragments of tools, mechanisms, or lost devices. Not proof of advanced technology, but suggestions that a different kind of knowledge once existed, one not yet understood. Even among the statues, there are anomalies. One in particular, a statue of an unnamed scribe, has been noted for the extraordinary realism of its eyes. Crafted with rock crystal, copper, and white quartz, the effect is lifelike and piercing, an uncanny presence. Were these merely decorative? Or did certain objects in ancient Egypt serve a function beyond aesthetics, designed to channel or store something more metaphysical? Energy? Awareness? Intention? In the museum's lower levels, many items are stored in crates and boxes, marked with inventory numbers, but little else. There are rumors, often passed between researchers and whispered among independent scholars, of items catalogued and then locked away. Artifacts that do not match any known period, inscriptions in unknown scripts, tools made of unidentifiable material. Some say these objects are simply awaiting analysis. Others claim they are too controversial to display. To be clear, these are not conspiracies. The museum's collection is vast, its funding limited, and Egypt's archaeological backlog immense. But the result is the same: a wealth of data hidden in plain sight, and among that data, anomalies. The museum's archives also contain photos, field notes, and excavation reports from the 19th and early 20th centuries. Many of these have never been digitized. Within them are mentions of artifacts that later disappeared or were reclassified. A statue with unusually long limbs, a stone box with unknown symbols, an item described as mechanical in nature, recorded and then never seen again. What are we to make of these fragments? Most likely, they are misinterpretations, artifacts taken out of context, ritual items mistaken for machinery. The past, seen through the lens of the present. But what if even a few of them represent something more? Could Egypt's long and layered history include chapters we've forgotten or overlooked? Is it possible that some of the knowledge once guarded in the mystery schools or encoded in megalithic architecture survives here, not in temples, but in boxes, misplaced, misnamed, misunderstood? The Egyptian Museum in Cairo is not a place of final answers. It is a threshold, a house of memory and mystery, a collection shaped by politics, by colonial expeditions, by floods and revolutions. And in its quieter corners, it may still hold keys to questions we have only begun to ask. What else lies hidden behind the shelves? What objects remain unseen because we don't yet know how to look? And how much of Egypt's true story still waits, not beneath the sand, but behind the glass? From the shadowed storage rooms of the Cairo Museum, where forgotten objects gather dust and questions, we step even further back, beyond the dynasties, beyond the pyramids, before the temples of Karnak or the hieroglyphs carved in stone, to a time when the Nile still shaped its first myths, and when the gods of Egypt wore different faces. This is the realm of the forgotten gods of pre-dynastic Egypt. The sun has not yet risen on recorded history. There are no pharaohs, no formal pantheon, no unified kingdom. Only scattered communities along the river, living close to the land, carving their stories into pottery, stone palettes, and cliff faces. And yet, even here, in the earliest echoes of Egyptian civilization, we find signs of worship, symbols of reverence, images of beings who walked between worlds. But who were they? Some of the oldest sacred figures appear in artifacts from the Naqada cultures, dating back as far as 4000 BCE. Long before Osiris, Isis, and Horus came to dominate Egyptian religion, there were other names, and perhaps other beings. Many of their identities are now lost, but fragments remain, strange and haunting. Among the earliest is the so-called Mother Goddess figure, fertility idols with wide hips, exposed breasts, and stylized, almost bird-like heads. Were these representations of life and birth, or of a deity no longer remembered? Some scholars link them to a Proto-Hathor figure, while others see connections to older Neolithic fertility cults that spanned from Anatolia to the Sahara. Then there is the Set animal, an ambiguous creature with a long curved snout, square ears, and a forked tail. Later associated with the god Set, this strange being appears in iconography long before Set takes on his mythological role. Some believe it represents a now extinct animal. Others say it was never real at all, a symbol born not of nature, but of something more abstract, more elemental. In the rock carvings of the eastern desert, far from the Nile's floodplain, are figures with horned crowns, outstretched arms, and curious proportions. Some bear resemblance to the later Min, a fertility god often depicted in a roused form. Others are harder to place, part human, part beast, part unknown. And there are even older symbols. The Serek, the earliest form of a royal name, appears alongside hawks, crocodiles, and other animals we now associate with Egyptian gods. But before Horus was Horus, before Sobek had temples, these animals were just that, animals, revered, feared, or perhaps seen as intermediaries between realms. Were they gods yet, or totems of a deeper belief system we no longer understand? The challenge of exploring pre-dynastic religion is the absence of text. There are no hymns, no myths, no theological treatises, only iconography and inference, pottery fragments with painted spirals, figurines with enigmatic poses, burial sites that suggest ritual but give no names, and yet, the structure is there. The alignment of tombs toward celestial events, the repeated presence of animal motifs, the careful treatment of the dead, often buried with grave goods, sometimes painted with ochre, positioned in fetal form. All of this suggests a belief in something beyond death, a cosmology already forming, a worldview older than writing. Could these forgotten gods have been the foundation upon which later myth was built? Some scholars believe so, that Osiris and Isis, Anubis and Thoth were not inventions, but evolutions, refinements of older archetypes passed down orally, reinterpreted over millennia. That the grand pantheon of dynastic Egypt was a polished surface hiding a deeper, more primal layer beneath. Others suggest something more mysterious, that the pre-dynastic gods were not simply local spirits or nature deities, but remnants of an even older religion. One inherited from a lost culture, perhaps dating back to the time when the Sahara was still green. The so-called Green Sahara hypothesis posits that before Egypt, there was another center of civilization, one whose gods and symbols migrated with its people as climate change forced them eastward to the Nile. If true, it would explain the sudden sophistication of early Egyptian religious iconography. The ready-made symbolism, the instinctive reverence for balance, duality, and the journey beyond death. Were these ideas born in Egypt, or carried in the minds of those who came before? And then there are the more speculative theories. Some researchers point to the similarities between pre-dynastic Egyptian symbols and those found in other ancient cultures: spiral motifs, bull horns, bird-headed figures. Could these be evidence of a shared global religious language? A forgotten prehistoric tradition that once spanned continents, now fractured and half-remembered? Mainstream archaeology is cautious. Without texts, such comparisons can only go so far. Yet the persistence of certain forms, the god with outstretched wings, the cosmic bull, the solar disk, suggests patterns that transcend borders and time. So who were the forgotten gods? Were they primitive spirits, bound to wind and water? Were they personifications of natural forces, later elevated into deities? Or were they something stranger, survivors of a vanished belief system, glimpsed only in fragments, like broken constellations? Perhaps they were all of these, or none. Today, the artifacts of pre-dynastic faith rest in museums and storerooms, labeled, catalogued, but rarely understood. A figurine here, a rock carving there, each a whisper from a time before the gods had names, before Egypt was Egypt. And so we are left with questions, not answers. What came before Osiris? Whose hands first shaped the divine? And how many gods once walked the Nile, before their names were lost to the river of time? From the forgotten gods of pre-dynastic Egypt, silent deities whose names have faded into stone, we now rise to trace their legacy not through myth, but through geography. To look at Egypt not as a map of cities and kingdoms, but as a grand design etched across desert and river, stretching from the delta to the southern border. And as we follow this design, something peculiar begins to emerge. The sacred temples of Egypt are not placed randomly. This is the mystery of the strange alignment of temple sites, from the towering pylons of Karnak to the sun temples of Abu Simbel, from the sanctuaries at Dendera and Edfu to the ruins beneath Luxor and Abydos. Many of Egypt's most important sacred sites are aligned along remarkably straight lines, not just within individual temple complexes, but across hundreds of kilometers. This observation has been quietly noted by surveyors and researchers for decades. Some alignments follow the Nile, others follow the sun. But a few, perhaps the most intriguing, defy easy explanation. One of the most discussed is the so-called Osiris line, an imaginary axis that appears to connect Abydos, Dendera, Luxor, Karnak, and ultimately Giza, cutting across Egypt in a near-perfect diagonal. Some believe this alignment traces a spiritual or energetic path, linking temples dedicated to rebirth, celestial union, and cosmic balance. But is it intention or coincidence? To understand the mystery, we must first recognize how deliberately the Egyptians built their sacred spaces. Temples were not placed for convenience. They were aligned with specific stars, solstices, and cardinal directions. Their axes pointed toward rising constellations, heliacal risings, and solar zeniths. The Temple of Karnak, for example, aligns with the rising of the midwinter sun. At Abu Simbel, the inner sanctum is lit precisely on 2 days each year, believed to mark the birth and coronation of Ramesses II. These were not decorative gestures, they were acts of cosmic integration. And yet, the scale of alignment across multiple sites complicates the picture. How did the Egyptians, without satellites or aerial maps, manage to construct temples hundreds of kilometers apart that fall on the same linear paths? How could such precision be achieved using the tools and surveying techniques known to exist at the time? Some suggest that the Nile itself served as a giant reference point, its path studied and measured with remarkable care. Others believe that oral traditions and generations of priestly knowledge preserved exact coordinates passed down in secrecy and ritual. But as the distances increase and the terrain becomes more complex, the challenge grows. Could it be that certain lines were chosen not just for visual or symbolic reasons, but because they followed something unseen? Some researchers have proposed that temple alignments correspond with telluric currents, subtle energy lines running through the earth, known in various cultures as ley lines. These theories remain controversial, but they persist. Ancient cultures around the world, from the Inca to the Chinese, constructed sacred sites along linear paths, often aligned with the movement of celestial bodies or subterranean energy flows. Did the Egyptians know something similar? There are also patterns in orientation. Many temples face east, welcoming the rising sun, but others are aligned to the north or northwest, toward the circumpolar stars, known to the Egyptians as the imperishable ones. These were the stars that never set, seen as the destination of the soul after death. Temples such as the Osirion at Abydos, deep and echoing, were aligned in ways that suggest not just architectural planning, but a deep spiritual intention to orient sacred space toward eternity. Intriguingly, some temples seem to mirror each other. Dendera and Edfu, two of the best-preserved temples in Egypt, share architectural similarities and symbolic motifs that imply a relationship beyond proximity. Both are tied to sky and resurrection. Both contain cryptic texts, astronomical ceilings, and references to the Zep Tepi, the first time of creation. Were they designed as part of a larger ritual landscape, their positions encoding a forgotten cosmology? Modern satellite mapping has revealed more curious alignments. By overlaying temple sites and ancient cities across a high-resolution map of Egypt, researchers have found linear connections not easily explained by topography or trade. Some alignments extend beyond Egypt's modern borders, toward the Sudan or westward into the Sahara. Could these be traces of ancient pilgrimage routes, or signs of a spiritual geography no longer understood? And what of the ruins still buried beneath the sand? We know that much of Egypt's ancient landscape remains hidden, covered by sediment, swallowed by cities, or lost to shifting riverbanks. Could there be other sites, other temples, that once formed parts of these alignments, now forgotten? If uncovered, would they complete the pattern? Mainstream scholars approach such questions with caution. Alignments can be coincidental. Humans are pattern-seeking by nature. With enough data points, lines can be drawn almost anywhere. But even the skeptics agree. The precision of many Egyptian temple orientations is too consistent to be chance. Something guided the placement. Something dictated the direction. Whether that something was symbolic, astronomical, or energetic remains uncertain. And so we are left with another riddle carved into the bones of Egypt itself. Did the ancient Egyptians map their land according to unseen forces? Did they use the stars not just to mark time, but to shape space? And what deeper knowledge might still lie encoded in the lines between their temples, waiting to be traced once again from earth to sky? From the silent geometry traced between temples, lines carved across the Egyptian landscape like threads of an unseen web, we now shift our focus from physical alignments to philosophical ones, to a lineage not of stone, but of spirit, one that stretches across centuries and continents, connecting the sacred science of the ancients with the hidden teachings of a far more recent age. This is the mystery of the Rosicrucian connection to ancient Egypt. In a quiet museum in San Jose, California, visitors step into a replica of an Egyptian temple. Lotus columns rise in silence. Incense drifts through still air. Hieroglyphs, meticulously painted, line the walls. The setting is strange, surreal, half museum, half sanctuary. This is the headquarters of the Rosicrucian Order, AMORC, a modern mystical fraternity whose origins, they claim, trace back not to medieval Europe, but to the temples of ancient Egypt. But how can a secret society born in 17th century Europe be tied to the distant rites of the Nile? The Rosicrucians first appeared publicly with the mysterious Fama Fraternitatis, published in 1614 in Germany. The document told the story of Christian Rosenkreuz, a legendary figure who traveled through Arabia, Persia, and Egypt before returning to Europe to found a secret brotherhood dedicated to esoteric knowledge, healing, and spiritual awakening. The text was part allegory, part manifesto, and it captivated minds across Europe. But the Egypt connection was more than symbolic. Rosicrucian writings speak often of Egyptian mysteries, of initiatory rites held in underground chambers, of sacred geometry, vibrational energy, and the belief that the ancient Egyptians possessed a spiritual science, one lost to the modern world but preserved in fragments by those who understood how to read its symbols. And so, Egypt became not just a place of origin, but a sacred blueprint. According to Rosicrucian tradition, the original mystery schools of Egypt were the fountainhead of all true esoteric knowledge. These schools, they claim, existed long before the dynasties, perhaps even before recorded time, and were dedicated not to worship, but to understanding the deeper laws of nature, consciousness, and the cosmos. Within their walls, initiates learned the secret of the soul's journey. They studied vibration, harmony, the structure of matter, the language of light. Are these just metaphors, or faint memories of a system now forgotten? Rosicrucian philosophy holds that the great Egyptian temples, particularly those at Karnak, Luxor, and Edfu, were not built as places of public worship, but as initiatory complexes. Every wall, every carving, every architectural proportion was designed to encode knowledge, to move the initiate through levels of awareness, from body to mind to spirit. This interpretation is not entirely new. Greek philosophers like Plato and Pythagoras claim to have studied in Egypt. Herodotus, the so-called father of history, wrote of Egyptian priests who preserved sacred knowledge through oral transmission. The Hermetic texts attributed to the Egyptian god Thoth, known to the Greeks as Hermes Trismegistus, described a cosmos governed by correspondence, rhythm, polarity, and mental causation. These principles would become the bedrock of Western esotericism and the Rosicrucian worldview. But is there historical evidence to support a direct link? Not in the academic sense. There are no papyri that mention Christian Rosenkreuz, no inscriptions connecting the Rosicrucians to ancient Egypt. But there are curious overlaps. The Rosicrucian emphasis on sacred geometry echoes the proportional harmonics found in Egyptian temples. Their belief in the soul's progressive ascent mirrors the imagery of the Amduat and Book of Gates. Their ritual language often borrows from Egyptian myth, invoking Isis, Osiris, and Horus as symbols of transformation. And then there are the symbols. The Rosicrucian rose and cross, two images seemingly unrelated, merge to represent the fusion of spirit and matter. Some have noted its resemblance to the Ankh, the Egyptian key of life. Others point to the recurring Rosicrucian motif of light radiating from the tomb, a theme deeply present in Egyptian funerary art. Light from darkness, rebirth from death. Could the Rosicrucians have preserved a strand of ancient thought long since obscured? Could their rituals be echoes, dim and reinterpreted, of rites once performed in the depths of Egyptian temples? Skeptics argue that the Rosicrucian Egypt connection is symbolic at best, an imaginative appropriation meant to lend antiquity and mystery to a modern movement. And yet, the resonance persists. The language of initiation, the ascent through stages, the belief that Egypt holds keys not just to civilization, but to the structure of the universe itself. It is no coincidence that many 19th and 20th century esoteric orders, Freemasons, Theosophists, Hermeticists, also looked to Egypt as their spiritual homeland. It became a cipher, a mirror, a silence filled with potential meaning. Even today, the Rosicrucian order continues to teach its students about the Egyptian mysteries, not as archaeology, but as inner experience. Meditation, ritual, dream work, and contemplation are used to remember truths not written, but lived. It is not the past they seek, but the timeless. So we are left, again, with a question. Is the Rosicrucian connection to ancient Egypt merely a myth constructed from symbols? Or is it a thread, frayed but unbroken, linking two worlds, one of sun and stone, the other of vision and silence? And if so, what knowledge might still pass, quietly and unseen, through the hands of those who remember? Perhaps the answers lie not in the temples alone, but in how we choose to read them, in the space between symbol and soul, in the mysteries that continue, hidden in plain sight.